No, hey, Jeff. And then she says, do you want me to grab your glasses?
I can't see them. Yeah, we'll get this figured out, I think.
So, you start interviewing or introducing primal movement patterns. You start introducing physical skills, like I said, rolling, jumping, hanging, climbing, things like that. In 3 to 8, 8 to 12, you start to introduce how to lift correctly. And then from 12 to 18, we have really our focus was always on, or became on getting strong. So it's always strength training. But there was strength training could also be body weight. So we had a significant portion of body weight movements in there as well.
It depends on how much you weigh too, right?
Yeah.
Might be a little harder depending. How come I always wonder why body weight movements are so bad. They just kill. Like a wall sit, for example.
You can't scale it. You have it really is part of the process for us was learning how to scale body weight movements so that people could do it. Well, I mean, a push-up is hard.
I guess maybe if they were doing a squat, they could hold onto a band or something or a rack and use their arms a little bit.
Limit the range of motion.
There you go.
Start with limiting the range of motion. Start with keeping them safe within that range of motion. Then slowly increase the range of motion.
I'm super excited to have you guys here today. Today we're here with Jeff and Keegan Martin, and I've known them for quite a long time. I'd say we probably go back like 8-10 years or something like that. And I went down to your gym in is it Ramona, or where are you guys at?
That's where we were.
That's where you were,
yep.
Right? And I remember going there because I was doing a lot of stuff with CrossFit at the time. I was doing some of the powerlifting certification courses and stuff. I think with my big fat friend Jesse Burdick. And as we were going around the country and as we were working with different people, whether it be CrossFitters or powerlifters, it didn't matter who it was, working with adults on a squat was hard. So when you invited us down, I was like, this is going to be a nightmare. I was like, we got kids powerlifting. I'm like, this is truly going to be a nightmare because I didn't know you at that time, and I didn't know what you guys had going on. But man, was I surprised at the way that these kids could move. I was like, this is the best class I ever taught. And I'm like, I had to make a small change here or there. And you're like, that's stuff I've told them before. But it was all very minor stuff. And the kids were moving great. And, Jesse and I were like, well, I guess it makes sense. If you start out moving the right way, then maybe you don't develop bad habits. So how long have you been passionate about some of this stuff, training kids and things like that?
Oh, geez. I've been training. My first job out of high school was coaching swimming and water polo. And so I've been doing that a long time, 40 years, about 40 years. Wow. And then got into martial arts. And I always had I always liked working with kids in the martial arts. And then as my kids started to get into middle school, and we started, they were in the martial arts program and they were active athletes. But I was seeing, my wife and I were seeing a problem, or not a problem, but a lacking, I guess, in middle school PE. And my kids couldn't do things that I thought were normal. Like you should be able to do pull-ups, you should be able to climb a rope, you should be able to do these kind of things. And we started looking around for ways to help our kids get better, and stumbled across functional fitness.
You're like, what's wrong with my offspring?
Exactly.
This shouldn't be possible. I mean, they should be genetic freaks like me, right?
Well, no, I needed to get them beyond what I could do. So I'm the kind that stand and look at the rope and go like, well, I don't know how I'm going to get up there, but I want my kids to be able to do it. And we found functional fitness, and functional fitness for us always wasn't about having the kids work out in the gym, but was about helping them within the gym to do whatever they wanted to outside the gym. And that really was kind of the genesis of how we got to where we were.
Yeah, I think it's it's great to be working with kids because it's confusing on if you have a young child, or even if you have like a niece or a nephew and you're trying to figure out, how do I get them involved in something where they can improve on their sport, I think the only thing people can kind of come up with is to send them to something that has more of that sport. So they send them to like a camp or something like that. Strength and conditioning is kind of not really thought about much, especially with how young some of the kids that you guys work with. How young are some of the kids that you guys work with?
Down to 3 years old.
Doesn't get much younger than that.
Yeah. Really, right when
we don't
they
want to
start
change their diapers.
Yeah, pretty much, right? But right when they really start to explore movement, that's when we're starting to work with them. And at that age, it's really all about just exploration, them learning how to interact with their environment. And once they can do that efficiently, then we start to layer in, motor patterns. Okay, now how can we get you to interact with your environment correctly in a way that you're not going to injure yourself, and kind of set it up in a way that when the parents do take them to those camps, because it's inevitable, right? They're going to take them to those camps. I want you to get better at baseball or soccer. And that might make them a better player, but they're always going to be a safe player. And then as they start to progress, they gain some different abilities as they get older. It's really focusing on strength, because we found strength is just a base for all fitness. And it positively impacts every other physical skill. If you can make somebody strong, then you can make them, really that transfers over to any other endeavor that we try to accomplish inside of the gym or outside of the gym.
They say it takes a village to raise a child. And I think in this case, when you're talking about trying to have a kid be successful in a sport, this also kind of takes a village. It takes the coach. It might take the experts, strength conditioning. It might take a lot of involvement from the parents. You guys have involvement with the parents as well as maybe the kid's baseball coach or soccer coach?
Sure. It starts with the parents, because the parents have to bring the kids to the gym. Kind of circling back to what you said before, people, strength and conditioning for kids is I want to say like the lost piece. Like, people see that if they want their kid to be good at baseball, they should put them in baseball, and they should go to the baseball camps, and they should go. But really, what's the base? The base is moving well. The base is being strong. The base is being able to apply those things then to whatever sports you want. So really, what we want to be is that base. If a sport is the top of the pyramid, we're the base of that pyramid. And what we see with parents is parents understand that, and they start bringing their kids to the gym, and they see these great kids starting to express really, really well. And then the coaches don't understand it. The sport specific coaches don't understand it. So then they start to limit it. Well, I can do the same thing. I'll have the kids do squats, or I'll have the kids do this. Well, I don't teach the kids how to throw a baseball, and I don't teach the kids to play football. I teach the kids how to get strong. I teach them how to move well, and then I teach them how to apply that to different things.
What have you guys seen with sports specific movements? Sometimes somebody will take something from a field or a court, and then they try to add weight to it. Are you guys fans of that? Or are you more fans of hey, let's just squat, bench, deadlift, bent over row, overhead press, kind of more of the basics of strength training?
Definitely the basics. It's funny that you say that. They try and add weight to it. I saw a guy in the gym the other day. He's on the cable machine, and he's got one of the spongy handles, just a single handle, but he's hooked it up to the cable machine. He's throwing pitches, right? It's gonna make you, he's gonna be able to throw faster now.
Man, if that guy can survive that, though, he might be able to really throw some heat, right? He's injury free, right?
100-pound pitches,
That's wild.
The basics. Because they apply broadly to everything else. If you can teach a kid to get in the proper position of the deadlift, it's easy to teach them then the first position of the clean or the snatch. It's really easy to then teach them how to jump correctly. Those dynamic, more complex movements become super simple if you master the basics and the positions of the basics. So that's really where we focus, and we focus for a large amount of time on that.
The problem is it's not sexy.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's the problem, right? So you say, I've got a 6-week agility camp for 8-year-olds. Well, can the kid really express agility and get better at agility going to your camp?
Well, especially when they don't have a basis of strength.
Right. Well, isn't a big component of agility strength being able to stop yourself and go the other way, right? So, but agility in a speed camp for a 12-year-old, that's sexy.
You're doing something on the minute every minute, and there's a lot of movement, and it's fast, and it's not powerlifting where you might do a lift and then rest for 4 minutes or 5 minutes.
And as Keegan said, what we do is, I want the kid to learn how to squat well. Then I want him to learn how to squat with a lot of weight. Then I want him to learn how to apply that to agility.
Is that usually where you guys start, is with the squat?
Squat, deadlift, and press.
Like a body weight squat? Or I mean, you said you got kids at 3 years old, so I imagine maybe they're just moving around their own body.
Hinge and bracing is usually where we start.
Bracing?
Just teaching them how to actually contract with ab flexion rather than hip flexion. So differentiating those two becomes extremely difficult.
You said
especially
brace and hinge, right?
Yeah, brace and hinge is usually where we start. Teaching them how to breathe correctly, squeeze and control their core, and then we teach them how to move their hips in the way that their hips are meant to move rather than breaking at the spine. So we teach them those two patterns first because we think that those apply to kind of globally.
Well, right now what
you
we
can't
see
really
with
teach
kids,
a squat without a hinge, right?
Right. What we see with the
that,
kids is that in the squat, when they start to squat, they break here, hold the pelvis back this way, and then they do their squat. And with the deadlift, picking something up off the ground, which is a deadlift, picking it up off the ground, they hinge at the SI joint and not at the hip. So really, you got to learn how to control the spine, like Keegan's saying. We have ways we do that with a 5-year-old, and then ways we do it with older kids, and those are different. And then they have to learn how to hinge and how to move at the hip, because it's unsafe to do either way, right? And most people, what they want to do is quick. Let's get them to the weight. Let's get them to the weight because that's important. No, learning to control the hip right and learning to control the spine, that's important. Then we'll do the other thing.
Nsima, did you get into lifting kind of simultaneously with soccer, or did you get into soccer like at a pretty young age?
I got into soccer when I was 6, and when I was thinking about all of the stuff that they do, I was just realizing how lucky it was that I started a sport so young. Just because, like, if I didn't start doing that sport, and especially with the coaches I had, all of my everything I do athletically right now
pretty
would
big
not
soccer
be
player,
possible.
huh? Other kids watching this right now, like, I should play soccer.
Yeah. And I just think about how crazy beneficial it is of what you guys are doing, because I didn't start lifting until I was 13. I was kind of lucky to start that, but that aided so much into when I returned back to the field, because I was so much bigger and stronger than everybody else that wasn't lifting. And then all my other college guys started lifting in college when I played with them. So the fact that you were going to be building all these mutant kids, right, to get on,
I bet you it would have been different too if you would have met up with guys like this, because you had a lot of knee problems, right?
Oh my God, yeah. I had Osgood Slaughter. So I mean, you've probably,
you guys would have been able to identify that and probably help guide them in a different direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
It's crazy. I think coaches and parents always push towards doing just more sport, and they don't see the benefit of the S&C program as the base. Like he said, the sport should be the peak of the pyramid. It's not your base, but the wider and the greater you build a base, the further the athlete's going to be able to go inside of their sport. You proved that with soccer, right? Mm-hmm. And, I think parents look at a camp and they're like, oh, I need to send my kid to this Tiger Woods golf camp because they're gonna be a better golfer. And that might be true, right? Like, they might come at the end of that camp, they might be a better golfer. But if you hang 50 pounds on their squat and deadlift, they're a different golfer completely, right? And then they have the ability to go further inside of that sport because of that. So building that base is that's what it's all about. And I mean, that's kind of cool that you experienced it, personally.
Yeah.
2 kids playing soccer, balls out there, they have equal skills, same size. One kid is twice as strong as the other one. Who's going to get the ball? The kid who's stronger is probably going to run faster, get the ball. If they meet up in the middle and they're struggling over the ball, who's going to get the ball? The one that's bigger and stronger, the one that's stronger. So why wouldn't you want your kid to be stronger? It just seems to me that in every way, strength is going to help you in a specific sport, in every single way.
Oh, what do you guys think about like field strength, like strength that's that you can clearly see on the court or on the field of play versus, somebody squatting 405 for reps, in the gym? I'm sure you guys have had some mutant high school kids come in before, and probably had a couple guys maybe bench close to 400 pounds, like on their way out of high school, or squat 500-600 pounds or some crazy weights, right? And that's cool, but a lot of times that's not like the best guy on the field. And so what are some of your thoughts on that? Trying to get that strength to really translate onto the field.
It translates in the way that they can express it best. So you take that athlete that's maybe strong inside of the gym, right? Our perfect example, we had an athlete that was benching, he benched 365 his junior year of high school.
Wow.
That's a pretty strong kid, right?
Yeah.
Really strong kid. And, he was one of the best players on the football team. But if you take away that strength, now look at him on the football field, right? He ended up going and playing D1, right? But let's take another athlete, like just your average athlete, right? Maybe we have a 400-pound deadlift at the end of high school, or a decently strong kid, and take that athlete, but take 200 pounds away from all of those lifts, and then apply it to their sport. Again, you have a different athlete, right? But in the opposite direction. So I think that they're able to apply it the best way that they can express it, and it's never going to hurt them to have that strength. It's only going to aid in their athletics.
It's also how you set up your class. So if I set up my class, we're going to do our squats, and they all do their squats, and I say, okay, see ya. What do they got? They've got stronger. They've gotten stronger. But we set our classes up so they do the squats. Then maybe we go outside and we do high box jumps. Then maybe we do something where we do some sprints. And as soon as you come back in from the sprints, you're going to do high box jumps, and then maybe you do some sprints and come back in and do some rope climbs, and you do some mirroring drills with your partner. So we get all of that, and what we're doing is being able to apply that strength, athletically. I'm not doing it on the football field because that's not what I do, but I can give them movement problems and require that they come up with their own movement solutions to things, and that takes them and forces them to use their strength that they've acquired in a different way. So take a medicine ball and say, okay, for 5 minutes I want to see who can throw the ball the furthest. Well, some guys are going to learn how to use their body, throw the ball far, and kind of saunter over there to pick the ball up. They've thrown it 30 yards or something. Yeah. Another guy might not know how to use his body well. He's throwing 5 yards, 10 yards. It becomes very exhausting for that other guy. He's going to start to have to learn how to use his body in a different way. And really, it's setting up your class to give them opportunities to use that strength in different ways.
How do you guys defining strength? How are you defining it in the athletes? So again, like just as an example, like you got this one kid who's like super strong on like one movement, but kind of sucks in a bunch of other ones. Are you guys, kind of, but the kid's not great on the field. Are you guys kind of trying to address more of that? Like you need to be like more over here doing this rather than like in that squat rack type deal.
We don't, we kind of went through as a lot of functional fitness gyms did. Went through a history of like you put the workout up on the board, and everybody does the workout.
Right.
And then we got to a place where
a lot of pluses and minuses to that style. Yeah.
Yeah, for the first couple of years, and then after that, you've got to individualize.
Right.
So we started to look at it and go, well, we individualize strength training, don't we? I don't come in and go like, okay, everybody, we're doing deadlifts today. Everybody's going to do 300 by 10. No.
Yeah, a bunch of people are already out, right?
Yeah. And well, some people are going to be out. Other people are going to be like, that's not going to do a thing for me because I'm not going to have any training adaptation to that. So why don't we do that with the rest of the program? We'll put up the workout, and then I'm going to go, well, Keegan needs to be a little bit faster off the line. So in accessory work, I'm going to have him doing like get up sprints, and somebody else needs to know how to push somebody around. So maybe I'll have a couple guys working together and do, King of the Ring or something like that. Why don't we do that and individualize the training a little bit so that we can take the what's necessary for each kid and adapt to that. And I think that's part of what we're trying to do with teaching coaches. You don't just look at the class and go, okay, today everybody's going to do cleans. Everybody can do cleans. Some people can't do cleans. Maybe a kid's doing dumbbell hammer curls because that's his version of a clean right now. But then on top of that, what does each kid need? And if you've worked with kids, if you have 30 kids in your gym, you know those kids, and you know where their problems are, and you know what they excel at. And so you should program accessory stuff to focus on those things.
You know what's really cool in this video? This kid doing this hip hinge. In college, my strength and conditioning coach never let guys deadlift because he was scared that they'd injure themselves, because the deadlift is like, and I've noticed that with a lot of college strength and conditioning coaches, they'll be like, no, we don't deadlift. Now, obviously you're having kids deadlift and you're teaching them the right movement patterns for that. But is there anything that you guys avoid, or do you just teach overall movement so that they can learn how to navigate themselves with these loads in space? Like, is there anything that's avoided?
Yeah, we avoid a lot of things based on their age and where they're at developmentally.
Okay.
So, you know, it's all based on where they're at physiologically, where their anatomy's at, biologically, what they have available to them. And that changes at different stages. With the Brand X method, we have 3 stages of development. We have our Explore group, which is 3 to 8 years old. Mm-hmm. We have Express, which is 8 to 12. And then we have Excel, which is 12 to 18. And at those different stages, they've got different gears, you can call it. So let's say with Explore, so the youngest group, right, 3 to 8 years old, they can express alactic type contractions. So they've got steady state, and that's it. So having them do deadlifts makes no sense.
Yeah.
Right? Having them do something like an obstacle course, money. Right? Because they're learning to interact with their environment. They're learning how their body moves. They're growing the entire time. That's awesome, right? But having them do something like snatches and box jumps, it makes no sense, right?
Yeah.
And then progress on up towards 8 to 12 years old. They can express like interval type training now. So you've got that slight progression towards now you can do almost a semi-type sprint, you know, and they need a little bit more time to recover now after that. So they're kind of learning that next gear to 12 to 18 where they can express max contractions, and they need a large amount of time to recover. So it's all based on development. You know, what they can actually do is based on where they're at developmentally, and it's based on where they're at in terms of their training. So we might have a 15-year-old come in who can express a max contraction deadlift, but he's not ready in terms of his movement patterns, right? He's moving like we have a 6-year-old that's been training with us for 3 years.
Yeah.
Right. So guess what? He's working, lightweight, maybe a kettlebell to remove the bar path, take out some complexity, but there's several layers to it in terms of, where we start, what we're doing, based on their development and what they've got available in their movement patterns.
Keegan talked about different ages. So you have like your chronological age, kid's 13. His biological age, he's developed fast, so he's 16 years old. Developmental age, he acts like he's 9. Training age, he's been with you 6 months. That's a kid that we would be limiting the range of motion in deadlift. We'd be teaching him how to control his spine, that kind of thing. A kid with a chronological age of 13, he's biological age of 16, he's developmental age of 16, and he's been training with us for 10 years. That kid's on the platform, on USAPL, pulling a state record. The problem with the deadlift is people call it the deadlift. When you're 4 years old, you should know how to pick stuff up off the ground. So we start with like a soccer ball. Let's learn how to pick up stuff off the ground. When you're 6 years old, you've got a 30-pound backpack that you take to and from school. You should learn how to pick that up. It's not a deadlift. It's learning how to pick something up off the ground. We teach the sumo stance deadlift almost entirely. That's what we teach in our class. Yeah. Unless somebody's competing and their levers require that they are better at standard stance. We teach the sumo stance deadlift because the wide stance is how you pick stuff up in the real world. Like there's nothing that you can bump your shins up against and go like, okay, I'm going to pick this up.
So it's not cheating.
No, it's not cheating. No, and powerlifters aren't fat. So, those are
not all of them.
No, that's 2 things that we want to make
anymore.
Clear. If you come away from this with 2 things, that's it. Sumo's not cheating, and powerlifters aren't fat. In fact, it has more application to the real world. than a standard stance deadlift does. The sumo stance, we found, kids who train wide can lift narrow. Kids who lift narrow don't necessarily are able to lift heavy wide. It transfers to strongman stuff, which we
think about what he just said for a second. In terms of like a squat, we've seen people squat with a close stance, and a lot of times people that squat with a closer stance, they're like, for lack of better terminology, their like hips are kind of closed off. They're just super tight, and so for them to try to go wide, it feels like their legs are like literally splitting apart from their body. However, if someone can express the ability to squat with a wide stance, going in much closer won't bother them at all.
We had a young man come in, good friend of Keegan's. He was a high jumper in high school. Came in the gym his junior year. He had jumped, I think he jumped 6'6" at the state meet.
Wow.
He was 6'2",
amazing.
weighed about 135 pounds. Ooh. His deadlift was 185 and terrible. His back squat was 135 and struggling. He was
gangly.
Gangly. Year later, he was closing on a 400-pound sumo stance deadlift. We trained entirely sumo, almost a 300-pound back squat, wide stance, low bar back squat. Went to the state meet. His coach called me and read me the riot act because he gained 10 pounds. And I was like, no, we tested him. Well, I know he's going to jump higher. He ended up winning the state 7-foot jump.
Wow.
And
it was a state record, California state record.
So but we'd only done wide stance training. He did some front squats, but mostly the training was low bar back squat, wide stance, sumo stance deadlift, high box jumps. I mean, we're talking how high were we jumping? You guys were jumping.
We were jumping on, over 50 inches routinely for repetition reps. Yeah.
And we put those in a workout. So, the kids would be doing,
5 reps, 5 to 10 reps of that. And then
do five low bar back squats, go over there, do five high jumps. And this kid was able to, move his feet in. People are like, well, if that's we want you to train an athletic stance. That's why we want you to do a narrow stance squats and narrow stance deadlift. And I go, well, but a athletic stance is wide, right?
Yeah, an athletic stance is actually very wide.
Yeah, like really,
a beginning stance, like a linebacker stance, is obviously not very wide. Or maybe the foot position of like a defensive end or something. It might not be that wide, right? In comparison to how wide you might have them squat. But look at when somebody, go to a baseball game and watch someone throw the ball from third to first. Mm-hmm. I mean, they step their foot out way out in front. Their feet are really wide. What about when someone's in the batter's box? Yeah. Their feet are usually spread pretty far apart. You look at a lot of different positions in sports. MMA, what about trying to block someone from taking you down?
Defensive
what about
position for basketball?
Very wide, right? Yeah, right. Running, I mean, when you run, your feet end up far apart from each other, right? So
I wouldn't know.
try to avoid that at all costs.
Doctor says I'm not allowed to run.
That's why you have your son here, though. You have him demonstrate, right?
Exactly.
He shows all the movement patterns and everything.
Right.
I think what you guys have done is unbelievable, because this is a tough job in so many different ways. There's so many things going on from so many different angles. And you mentioned the development of a kid, his training age, their actual age, and just kind of how they act. I mean, man, you're really dealing with a mess of things going on all at one time. And so you guys no longer have your gym, right? You shut that down, right?
Yes.
And you guys are coaching coaches. So I'd imagine the task now is it's not even really coaching coaches. It's like coaching leadership and coaching mentors in some way, right? I mean, they got to know the X's and O's of what goes on in the gym, but they also have to know how to command respect from these kids. They also they have to know how to treat their emotions I mean, this is a wide range of things that you're dealing with. You're not just, not just online coaching some people and spitting out a program. Yeah. This is difficult.
Yeah. And
why'd you guys choose something so damn hard?
Right. Would have been a lot easier to choose something else. I think,
taking the hard road.
Yeah. The program itself, the Brand X method has grown really over the past few years, in the fact that we started with, just getting kids moving. And then we realized that that's not enough.
It's a low bar.
That's a really low bar, just getting kids moving. I mean, it's great, right? Kids are moving. Sure. That's awesome. But it's not necessarily helping anything, right? It's not helping any of the issues that we're seeing come up. So we need to have a base. Okay, well, what does that base look like? Well, it looks like getting them moving well. Okay, well, now that's a start. Now, how does that grow? Well, it's getting them moving well and getting them really, really strong, right? And so now now we have this awesome base, and then how do we get there? Well, developmentally, what do they need at age 3, right? Developmentally, what do they need at age 9? How does that change, and how do we morph the program to get us to that point? And recently, this past month, we released our it's the most comprehensive course to date that this industry has seen for training kids. And it's the professional youth coaches course. And we built that with James Fitzgerald of OPEX. I think you guys are going to have on in a couple weeks here on the podcast. So that's pretty cool. But it's morphed into
James is kind of another one on a special list in terms of his welcome with the CF. I'll say
yeah
the CF people.
Don't say the C word here. Yeah,
he won like the first CrossFit Games, right?
Yep.
Yeah. That'll be a good story.
Yeah, that'll be pretty cool. Yeah. So we developed a pretty good relationship with them, and he's actually part owner of the Brand X method and helped us co-brand this course. And we're super excited about it because it's got everything. It's developmental, biopsychosocial, anatomy and physiology. It's got everything you need to know as a coach going into this. Like I'm working with age 4, and then it's just plug and play, right? Like, I'm working with Explore Group. We're gonna prepare. We're gonna practice. We're gonna play.
As I start to think about this even more, this job gets to be even more and more worserist, as I like to say, because if you're dealing with if he comes in with his 6-year-old son, and Andrew comes in with his 7-year-old son, and the 7-year-old's doing some more advanced stuff. Now he's watching, and he's like, "Hey, I want my kid doing that."
Right.
So now there's kind of that side to deal with, and then also just even parents aside. There's just the kid just like feels left out. Like I want to kind of do what they're doing.
Right.
So you got to probably try to figure out a way. It's you end up with individualized program, but also some group stuff that's just fun because they're kids, right?
Have to. There's
You want the kid crying every time. Every time he's out the door.
Yeah.
Maybe every other time.
Maybe every other. Yeah. There's 3 egos. There's your ego as a coach. I mean, like I want the kid to lift more, right? There's
kids got to squat and deadlift and bench.
Right.
That's it. That's all we're doing.
There's the kid's ego. You just mentioned it. There's the parent's ego. I mean, it's a minefield. Usually if you're dealing with an adult, you're just dealing with your ego and his ego.
Yeah, that's it.
But you got to deal with the kid too.
Right.
And it's really important that kids work out together. Like just coming in and going, okay, I'm going to have this specialized program for little Johnny. That might work with 1% of the kids who are really focused. They're 8 years old and they I'm going to be a football player, and that's all he's going to do. Until he finds out his genetics won't let him be a football player. Then he'll be really good in high school and he's out. But if you want kids to keep coming back, so, making someone move well, how long does that take? Like an adult, how long does that take? It takes
years.
Well, if I've got a 5-year-old coming in and I want him to squat well, and then I want him to learn how to apply that strength to other things, how long does that take? Well, it takes into his teen years. And if I don't make it fun for that kid to come back, if I don't give him like things where he sees a progress, where he sees that he's good at something, then in the class, then I'll never have the time to do my job. I simply won't, which is why I think a lot of times people just start loading weight on kids, and they go, well, look, you were squatting 135, now you're squatting 185. Well, they'll never squat 225 because they squat like crap. I need to make them come back over and over and over again. So if I've got, one of our favorite kids, this Nick,
You're supposed to have favorites.
Nick was in our program forever. He was, a kid who came in, he was overweight. Everything was stacked against this kid. He's, dad wasn't in the picture. Mom was in prison, raised by his aunt, ADHD, impulse control things, anger issues, because of all that other stuff, overweight. And kid never, he couldn't latch on to anything. So we had an in-house weightlifting meet.
It was the one you were at. Yeah.
No, it was Jesse. It was Jesse.
Maybe my brother went to it or something.
It was Jesse.
Oh, Jesse went.
Jesse was there. And we tried to get Nick to come in, and he wouldn't. Keegan and his buddies finally talked him into coming in. So Nick's 13 years old. Couldn't concentrate, so we could never let him lift more than one rep. He could do one rep beautifully, but if you said three reps, like the second rep, it's like shiny thing. You can't lift more than one rep. But in the meet,
I feel like that.
He started off with a 200-pound, deadlift. Walked up, beautiful deadlift. So we built him up, and I think it was we got up to like in the back, we got up to like 255, and he pulled that. It was wonderful, and we said, let's just let him go up. We went 285 the next time, and we put on 300 pounds and give it a try. So we have a video of Nick, 5'6", 245 pounds, 13 years old, walks up and just, gets himself wide, reaches down, grabs it, double overhand, stands up with 300 pounds, boom. Everybody in the room's like, whoa, it's probably the first time Nick had ever had success at anything athletically, and everybody clapped. So we went away to do some training for about a month, came back to the gym, and Nick meets me at the door and says, you got to see this. And I walk back and I see a guy standing by the pull-up bars in the back of the gym. And it looks like Nick, but it looks smaller. And walk back there, and this kid grabs the bar, and it's Nick, and he starts pulling, and he pulls, and he does his chin up, does pull up. And he'd lost 15 pounds. Here's a kid who never could really even hang on the bar, did his first pull-up. That one success drove him.
Yeah.
And the kid's now, 6'2", weighs 215 or something like that. He's got a close to 600-pound deadlift.
Yeah, he's closing in on 6. So
My God.
But it
Created a monster.
It changed his life. That one lift, one successful thing changed his life. And you have to find those things for every kid that walks through in the gym. And that's what drives the kids, and that's what changes their lives, and really leads them onto a path of what we want. Isn't that they're great in the gym, it's that they can do whatever they want outside the gym, and they have movement for life. And that's really where we're at with this.
Yeah, it's I've kind of have pointed out many times just through my own observations of being in here. I can easily tell like who hasn't gotten a pat on the back. Like it shows. Like I can see it. I can see you wearing it. I can see it when someone goes up to the squat rack. Like, man, this son of a bitch never got a pat on the back. No one ever told him good job for anything. Right. And you can't just get a pat on the back. You have to earn it too, because it's like people talk about these positive affirmations where you get up and talk about how much you love yourself, and it's like it's all bullshit, because you can't love something that you didn't work towards to be able to actually really truly appreciate it. It has to come from like inside. You have to have actually earned it. You guys mentioned earlier kind of producing that hormone. If you're like forced to do something, it doesn't even happen, right? With exercise.
Right.
You mentioned that earlier, right?
Yeah.
So it's like that what you're doing is so awesome in so many different ways, because you're getting the kid to try something, you're getting them to experience something, and then there's some positive reinforcement behind it, which a lot of people just never get a chance to experience.
You were talking about how do we work with coaches. I think that every coach has to have its own style. For me, it was really important that you didn't like give artificial praise.
Right.
And I think that what kids came out of our program with was this idea that if they worked hard, they learn about long-term goals. Keegan can talk about that kind of thing probably better than I can, but I was never the kind of coach who stood and yelled faster, at the top, go faster. I'd rather walk up behind next to a child and say, that was an awesome lift. That's great. Real quietly. He's the only one person who heard it. But what he heard was coach concentrated on him, that, you were, for a second, for the coach, that kid was his world, or, the kid was his world. Like, I am focused entirely on what you just did. And that was wonderful. And that was awesome. And, when they make a correction, and there's thousands of corrections, so you have 1,000 opportunities to walk up. Hey, I really want you to keep your chin down when you're pulling. When I see you pulling, I see you pushing your head up first. I want you to keep the chin down. You did it, fantastic. That's really great, cool.
You see those small improvements,
right? But take those opportunities as a coach to acknowledge them, and then the kid says, okay, I got that pat on my back. The coach. This is a place where the coach is listening to me and looking at me and really, wants me to succeed.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's huge. How do you kind of work out in terms of trying to create leaders inside? Like, I know you don't have the gym model anymore, but with building up these coaches, how do you guys work on that side of it? Because some people might be like if I'm coming in and I'm gaining all this knowledge and taking your course, like that's great. But if I'm not going to speak up, or I'm not going to kind of take charge, it might be hard for me to get the attention, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one way that we've started to really push that idea of leadership inside of our own community is we have these things called Brand X Method Labs now, and we've got 3 of them worldwide, and those are the centers they're doing our best practices, right? They're the ones that are upholding what the Brand X Method is, and really carrying out the vision now in terms of on the ground actually doing it. Because we're in the background now, right? Like now we've taken a step back from actually coaching kids, and before it was all our content. All those videos that you guys pulled up, it's funny, most of those weren't our kids. We didn't coach those kids personally, but a lot of those videos that you pulled up came from the labs, and you only get the title lab if we see consistently good movement from kids and a progression that we've suggested. So really that's kind of one way that we've developed that leadership is going, these are the guys that you want to follow. Why? Because they followed exactly what we've said in each and every step. Developmentally, they're on the right track for all their kids, and all their kids are moving beautifully because of it. It's Brand X, what Brand X was in Ramona, now in 3 different locations worldwide. So it's pretty cool.
We have webinars. So we have usually 2 to 3 webinars a month. We focus on either like a movement or a coaching topic, and all the labs or all of the training centers can get on and ask us questions. We can talk them through. We have mentoring. I mean, everybody, almost all of the training centers have my cell number. So I'll get
Cool.
2 or 3 emails or texts over the weekend, like, hey, look at this, or here's something, and we have discussions back and forth, so we can start to have some impact on the actual coach in there. The labs lead the way, and the labs where they're called labs because it's where we lab new ideas. So that idea with the how do we teach the hinge? Put the band on the chin, put the band on the hip. There's tension there. They can find when they flex. They can find when they can find when they extend. They can find when they flex, and the kids can get a kinesthetic awareness of what's going on with their body. We did that. We said that the lab said, try this out, and they try it out. Then I say, did it work? Yeah, it worked. Okay, let's videotape it. Video it. We'll put it up. And that's kind of what we do.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
My mom, when I was younger, she put me in like music, and she put me in like sports. And I know she knows a lot of parents that have kids, and they don't put their kids in physical stuff just because they're like, it's taken away from school. I want them to concentrate on this. I want them to be able to get to college, etc. But you were talking about earlier about how much like all of this stuff benefits not just, the kids that are going towards sports, but their academics. So what kind of benefits have you seen this have on kids outside of sport, movement, academically?
I'll let Keegan talk to that, but in our gym, open 20 years, I think we had 8 valedictorians come out of our gym. We had, I think we had 3 salutatorians. All of our, most of our kids were on the, 3.5 and above. Our youngest son switched schools because he wanted to get a 5.0 his senior year, which is just silly. Like, okay. I didn't, when I was growing up, they didn't have 5.0. They had rocks and tablets. Other than that. But Keegan can talk more to that.
Sounds like a version of schooling, right?
Yeah.
Like high school 5.0. No, yeah, I think there's 2 big things there, right? One is if you look at how movement affects learning, it affects it greatly. And we were talking out there earlier, recess is being removed now for kids because of budget cuts. PE is kind of going away because of budget cuts. They want kids inside a classroom just studying.
We got to get you learning more, so you can't be outside and can't get any sun. And
Dude,
can't
that's
get
the
some
same
fresh
concept.
air.
The same concept as the parents sending the kids to a camp to play the sport that they already play 365 days out of the year.
Yeah,
Is that really going to work? No, you need a base, right? And that base is movement, and it's there's that chemical that you mentioned a few minutes ago, BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, right? That's released, but only on voluntary exercise. So when kids play, they release BDNF. When they exercise voluntarily, they release BDNF. We had these study groups at Brandex in Ramona where it was immediately post exercise. We grabbed our worst subject and we went to the study room. And we had a tutor in there that we did a trade with her. She could train at the gym. Her kids could train at the gym, but she, tutored the kids inside of the class. And so post workout, we would go in there. We'd study our worst subjects, whatever our grades were most lacking in. And all of a sudden, we started to see as a group, the entire group's grades got better. All of our GPAs got better. And I think there's something to be said about that. Like exercise positively impacts academics.
There's a lot of science that backs that up. You can just go for a walk and then go to study, and it has a huge impact.
Absolutely. I try and do that. Even when I'm programming for my clients, I start getting more creative ideas because I'll walk on the treadmill 10 minutes or walk outside 10 minutes and then sit down and program. And it's like, oh, all of a sudden these workouts are 10 times better. My clients are like, oh, dude, he's got some good ideas this week.
We were just mentioning that yesterday.
Yeah. But I think beyond that, the gym now is a platform for kids to learn things that they don't have the ability to learn elsewhere. Right? Because like life nowadays is so easy, but the gym teaches you how to work hard. It teaches you how to goal set. So if you take that away, or sports even are kind of similar, if you take that away from a child, you're removing the ability to learn all of these valuable life lessons. So it is unfortunate. Sometimes, parents are really focused on academics, but just hammering home the academic side and not allowing a kid to move is removing learning in itself.
James, you're going to have him up in a couple of weeks, but James asked this question. I think it's really pertinent to this: is why do you have kids work out? Think about it. Well, why are you really going to bring your kids in and I'm going to have them do, he's 6 years old, I'm going to have him work out. Well, it isn't that we're trying to get him to work out. It's we're trying to get him to move. We're trying to get him to learn how to move and to enjoy moving, because everything works better if you move. Your body works better if you move. Your mind works better if you move. And if we can get these kids early on to think of movement as breakfast,
it's vital. Like
it's part of what you do. Like if you don't do it, you're going to have problems. So why do we have kids move? Because we want them to have a full life. Why do we have them work out? Because we want them to have a full life. Why do we take PE out of school? Well, it's not a good idea for us to do that.
Yeah, when this what you guys are mentioning, I've always kind of referred to the gym as being artificial exercise. It's just because we just don't have the same human demand that we once had. We can, shop on Amazon,
right?
We get our groceries and everything delivered right to our front door. So you just don't have to do as much. And so it makes sense. Like we got to offset, some of the things that are going on. People are on their phones a lot. People are playing a lot of video games and stuff like that. And I think those things, I personally grew up playing some video games. I don't have any problem with it, but there's got to be some sort of balance to it all, right?
There's no problem with the screen time. The problem is what the screen time replaces.
Right. That's a great way of putting it.
Well, that's not me. That'd be my wife. She said.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, she's sitting over there going, "Son of a bitch, he just stole that from me."
I'll do it. I do it all the time.
Yeah, and then take full credit.
Absolutely.
For it, right?
Why wouldn't I?
What about building leaders inside the gym? Is this something that you guys teach too? Because you guys probably got to be really good at that in terms of like maybe poking and prodding certain people to do certain things so that it would drive the rest of the group. Louis Simmons did that a lot. Louis Simmons would be like, "Oh, so and so, benched 515 for 5 reps this morning," and then he'd just walk away, and you're like, "Oh man,
gotta hit 517.5."
That's right. Right.
Yeah. No. It's all about building culture, right? And creating a culture inside of the gym where everybody wants to be looked up to, And I think as the coach, really, if I think back to when I was inside of, organized sports as a kid, what I wanted from my coach was recognition. And I think every kid wants that, Every single kid wants to be recognized by the coach. They want that pat on the back that you were talking about, right? And so that's a huge thing, but you only give that pat on the back as a coach when you get what you want, so that you build the culture that you want inside of your gym. That's how we get kids to move well. They start moving, whichever one of them is moving well, I point it out, right? Like, Nsima, dude, you got your knees right over the tops of your toes. That was perfect. Good job on driving your knees where they need to be when you squat. Everybody look at Nsima.
Oh, that makes me feel good.
It does. When you're 8 years old, you're like, dude, I am the king of the class today. You start strutting around, but it builds that culture, right? And then all of a sudden you start getting these kids that are leaders in the class in terms of the culture that you want to develop. I know you've got some pretty good stories in terms of, transitioning from me inside of the class to Duncan and his friends, and then eventually the last group that we had.
Yeah, I got a couple stories. bunch of them. I got a bunch of them. No, I think that was interesting that it isn't just the culture; it is what the coach does, and I think that's what Keegan was kind of referring to. What do kids need? So, like, one of the things I would recall that we would do that I thought helped kids was early on I would start to do, so we'd go out, we'd do the squat. So every day, I know it got repetitive, but I would go over what the squat should look like. And I don't care I try to figure out different ways of explaining where the hips should be and where the knees should be and what you're trying to accomplish. And I would, every time we're doing a squat in the workout, we're going to have that explanation. And then we go through and we teach the squat, and everybody would gather around. We'd all go through the squat. We'd make minor corrections, then trying to involve the kids. So, hey, Keegan, come on out here and teach the squat. And then Keegan would go through teaching the squat. And, Duncan come out and teach the squat. Sophie come out and teach the squat. So maybe 2 or 3 different kids coming out and teach the squat. And they had the experience of public speaking. They had experience of being leaders. They had experience after they'd done it a while of trying to make up their own, like, okay, well, I heard him do it this way. I want to try to do it this way. That's a process of developing them, outside of just, look, you're squatting well. Let's try to develop them further beyond that. Give them leadership. We would do things like make them, almost like he was talking about being leader of the class. Like, try to catch Keegan on the run. Hard to catch Keegan on the run. See who can keep up with him.
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
It's easy to catch Keegan on the run now.
if it goes further than 3 yards, yes. Yeah. But the first 3 yards, that's really fast.
You guys mentioned earlier the study room that you used to have at the gym, and I thought when I went down there and you guys showed it to me, I was like, "Oh my God!" I'm like, "This is great." And so, how did that work? What did you guys do with that?
Well, it started off with really just a study circle. Like, I would just tell the kids, bring in when we started seeing that research that you guys talked about, that exercise impacted BDNF, made learning easier. I said, well, why don't we try to see what we can come up with here? And so I had the kids bring in homework that was in the class that they were doing the worst in, and I'd just get them in chairs and sit them down and say, okay, bring that in. And they'd sit there and they'd do their homework. And what was cool was, one kid's bad at math and another kid was good at math. They'd start to help each other. It was awesome. And then we took over our second suite, and we had this extra room. I said, well, why don't we, actually, I think it was Mickey who said, again, I'm going to give her credit.
Don't want to get in trouble.
Well, don't want to get in trouble again. And she just designed a workout or a homework area, and then we did it in that specific room. So we had whiteboards in there and desks in the room, and then eventually we said, well, we had a teacher who and we said, hey, you want to come in here and be a tutor? And we tried that, and holy cow, that was amazing. That's kind of the progression of how that started to, kind of went through.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then in terms of like nutrition with these guys, I mean, that must be a tough area to try to cover with kids. They're eating French fries and they're not eating breakfast, and it's a real hard thing to unpack. And then you got to talk to the parents a lot, I'm sure, right?
Yeah. So, kind of the concept of ego that we discussed earlier, it's the same thing applies to nutrition. There's three pieces, right? You as the coach have to lead. Like if they see you walking in and you're chugging an energy drink and eating a bagel, like they're going to copy you. If you're walking around and you're snacking on goldfish all day, they're going to try and copy you. So you got to lead by example. You got to do exactly what you want them to do. And then you got to start with education with the parents. And kids are going to be kids, right? So every once in a while, they're going to want to eat birthday cake. They're going to want to have candy on Halloween, and you got to allow for that stuff. So really what we try and do is we try and have kids leave our program with a better concept of what food is and how to utilize it as fuel for their bodies. So it's rather than, like trying to get them to prescribe to any one diet. It's, this is a protein. This is what it does for you. This is a carb. This is what it does for you. This is a fat. This is what it does for you. And teaching them about food and how to utilize it and what amounts to eat it in really goes further for us rather than saying you can't have these foods. Because what we found is that, like, you say that to a child, the first food they're going to have when they can get their hands on it is the food that you said, hey, you can never have soda. Right?
Yeah, at such a young age, if they're already making better decisions, I mean, they're going to be so much better off than the general public.
Tons.
So when we raising our kids, we went through a really strict period. Like, okay, that's it, no more sugar, and
kids revolted.
Oh, they did. So
I revolted.
So I'm being a good parent. Kids go off to school, and I go into my older kids' rooms, Connor and Keegan, and I toss the room. So I'm looking for everything that what could they possibly be into. I want to make sure that
having a military dad must have been great.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome for him, I'm sure. So I'm tossing the room, and we've just bought them new beds, and I toss Connor's bed over, and I look at it, okay, cool, and I toss Keegan's bed over, and there's a hole in the bottom of his box spring.
My God.
And I go, shit. Because I wasn't in kids class, so I could say shit. And I reach in there, and I find a bag. And I'm, oh no, God, what am I going to do? And I pull it out, and it's a huge quart-sized bag full of gummy bears and jelly beans and things like
Jolly
that.
Ranchers.
You sat on the bed and cried for 3 hours, right?
I was so upset.
He's on gummy bears.
So no,
He's a problem.
no, I was more creative than that. So I went downstairs and I got a bag of almonds and fish oil, and I dumped them into the thing, put it back in the bed, turned it over.
That's great.
Yeah.
I was pissed. I came back. I was like, put it back.
Welcome to the Martin's house.
That sounds like a nightmare almost.
Yeah. So did you talk about base, build, and boost?
Yeah. So base, build, boost, that kind of matches up with, we kind of talked about our explore, express, and excel groups, right? And how those stages of development are really what we try and follow in terms of the kids progressing through our class. We have three terms, base, build, and boost in terms of talking about their nutrition. And base is just food identification. It's just teaching them what food is. That's really it, because kids nowadays, like, you hold up a picture of a pizza, they'll be able to identify that, right? You hold up a picture of candy, they'll be able to identify that. But you show them a picture of broccoli, and it's like crickets. They have no idea what it is. So it's just food identification, teaching them what food is, and then you start digging into macronutrients inside of your build group, where you're discussing, what proteins do for your body, what fats actually do for your body. And you can actually even, we've done this a few times where we've cooked for the kids inside of the class and had them try some foods after class, talk to them a little bit about when they should be eating those foods, all that good stuff. And then boost is where you start to individualize it, just like they're programming with weightlifting. For your goals, this is what you're going to need in terms of your macronutrients, and what you should target hit. So it's a really slow process, just identifying foods. This is what food is. This is the foods that you should have all the time. These are foods that you should have sometimes. And these are the foods that you should try to use as treats, and then slowly morphing that into how can you utilize food as fuel.
You mentioned, the parents, and the parents, especially with the younger kids, they control the diet.
Right.
And the problem is often that cooking is how parents and show love, And so coming to somebody and going like, dude, pasta every night, not so good. Well, now you're telling a kid, don't love your kid because I can't, and so it's really a minefield of talking to the parent, like, and so we would involve in the older age groups when we start talking about the boost group, when we do little half-hour talks on nutrition, we'd invite the parents to come in too and have them sit there. And we're not trying to say you're doing it wrong. We say, look, this is the best way to do it, and we divide carbs up into, vegetables and then that other crap, and, have that discussion. Like, you can have some of this other stuff, just don't make it the main part of the plate. Right. And then it wasn't so focused on what that parent is doing. And,
right. And then you guys doing it at your house, probably helps a lot, because then you can go in and talk about strategies. Hey, we cook up, when we cook, we always cook a little extra. We have leftovers for the next day, like all that kind of stuff. All the little, it's those little things that I think people always just think everything's gonna be so hard. And it's like, to give your kid like 2 nutritious meals every day is not hard.
No, that's a low bar.
Yeah, and they can have, one, they got a snack, and they have, they're going to have whatever they have with their buddies, and there's going to be some things that are outside the box, but breakfast and dinner should be fairly healthy. It shouldn't be too hard.
Yep.
We made, just as a family, I used to get up, go down the hill at 4:30, go to work, and I work for biotech, and then come up, open up the gym, work in the gym, bring the kids to the gym, have them come in with me. They were there until we went home, and then we always had family dinner. And even if we got home at 8:30, our kids still sat down. We had family dinner. And I think there's so many times now with kids being overscheduled and parents being driven, they forget that that's such a key component. Look, if we're all gonna sit down, we're all gonna sit together. We're not gonna drive through Jack in the Box, grab you a hamburger on the way home from soccer practice. We're gonna sit down and we're gonna have something. So scheduling out how you're gonna do that is maybe may take a little time, but it's really important to the quality of the home as well as the child growing up.
Yeah. I think that's huge, and I think that's kind of a forgotten piece when people talk about nutrition. I mean, that is a very healthy practice. Because when you're talking about how to put these things into play, if you actually kind of enjoy it, or if you start to like it, and everyone starts to get a rhythm down, and now it's abnormal for you to not have that, and something disrupts that, you're like, man, we haven't had a chance to sit down and have dinner together. This sucks. We need to figure this out again. We need to get back in the swing of things.
I think too, like, there's certain markers with kids. Like, most parents will tell you they kind of felt a separation when the kids start to get into high school. Like, kids start to close down. They don't open up as much. They're trying to develop themselves as their own person, and kind of break free from being one under your wing, I guess. You'll
never allow Keegan to do that.
Nope.
Not allowed to.
No.
Got to stay right
there. He was the first one to do it. But, that family dinner time was a time where, you're forced to sit there and I can ask you how your day is. Yeah. Good isn't a good answer, or isn't a good enough answer. Let's have a little discussion, and you can stay connected. The gym was awesome because we could stay connected. Like, I was still programming for Keegan at that time. And so there was that hour where Dad is focused on what he's doing.
Did that ever get hard?
Yeah, I think there's a fine balance between coach and dad, right? Like, and that's super hard to find.
I mean, you just might say something the wrong time at the wrong way, or it might annoy you or upset you, or
Totally,
right?
Yeah,
he did that all the time.
Yeah. No, but yeah, absolutely. I think there's there's a fine line of when to be coach and when to be dad, and reading that as a parent is really, really crucial if you're gonna be coaching your kid. He did a really good job of it, but yeah, there's still times that you can think back to and go, oh man, that was hard, but I think as from a parent's perspective, and now being a parent myself, going, okay, separating dad from coach that's the critical piece. There's got to be a difference, and you got to know when, as dad, to step in and go like, hey, I'm really proud of you.
It's kind of hard because as a dad, you are a coach too, so it's like hard to separate the two. Like, in some ways you kind of are, you're like a life coach, you're trying to coach them along, and you're trying to give them the facts, and then also allow them to make their own decisions.
Exactly.
And also not be so soft on them, but show them that you love them and you care about them, but also be tough enough on them so they don't grow up, to just get run over by everything in life.
It got to a point where it was really separate between home and the gym. And that's where I think it was perfect, the balance between the two, where it was like in the gym, he's coach. And he treated me the same way that he taught, all of his other athletes, which I appreciated. It was like just a kid inside of the class. And then when you go home, it was dad, I really like the way that you did this today. I'm really proud of you, and having that separation, I think that's where parents who are coaches are going to thrive.
Very cool.
Yeah.
You guys ever train together? Workout partners?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit?
Yeah.
Yeah. Every once in a while.
At this point, it'd be more him coaching me. Like, dude, your arthritic hip doesn't work that way. You need to do this way now. It's kind of reversed. All three of the boys at this point have at one point or the other programmed for me or coached me. They all move really well, and they're all invested in fitness at some point or some way that, Keegan is taken toward powerlifting. Connor is, our oldest, is working as a competition director for a gym.
Oh, cool.
And programs for fitness, functional fitness competitions. Our youngest is studying kinesiology at San Diego State, wants to be a physical therapist. He walked onto their cheer team, and now is the captain of the cheer team. They came in 5th in the nation this year. He's kind of the story of the kind of like, this is what we wanted to produce.
Right.
He
got better as the kids got younger.
Yeah. He didn't play sports. He like sampled sports when he was in elementary school. Entered high school, decided he wanted to play rugby because, if you're the smallest kid in the school, it's a good idea to play rugby.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we're just going like, that's when you step in as a dad and go like, I'm going to talk to you about this decision. And he was like, I don't want to really play. I'm going, you need to be really fast because they're big guys and they're going to fall on you.
Yeah.
And so he played rugby for 2 years, and he, 6 months in was, starter on the team. Senior year said, I want to go out for track. I'm going, well, okay, so you were fast because you were the smallest kid in there. That's good. And he goes, no, I want a pole vault. So, okay, well, that takes, right. Okay, pole vault. So he made the county finals, and the coaches are like, well, why didn't he pole vault all year? He didn't, why'd you hold him back? Well, I didn't. He just decided he wanted to pole vault. And then he went to San Diego State and decided, I want to go out for, he was going to go out. He was actually on his way, he said, to go try out for the rowing team. And then somebody said, try out for the cheer team. And now he's, the captain of the team.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
They just finished 5th at nationals. Yeah. And he's captain of their team, which was pretty cool because it was something that he never done until college,
Do you guys have, so I know you guys focus on movement with kids. Are there different pathways for different sports? Because I know it gets more specific as the kids get older, but like if you have a kid that's like, okay, I'm concentrating on football, another kid who's like, I'm basketball, I'm wrestling. Do you guys have like specific pathways and things that you do for kids that choose to go to these sports?
We don't. We don't, because we rely on the movement. But what we do is develop coaches who can individualize. And so I would individualize. Keegan was a soccer player. I'd individualize workouts for Keegan for soccer. We'd have basketball players come in. I'd want them, what do they need to do? They need to be quick and they need to jump high. So we're going to work on that within the workout for that child. We had, our oldest son was a wrestler. Mm-hmm. So a lot of doing suplexes with bags and things like that as part of the workouts, and learning how to clean well and getting a strong hips, those kind of things. So yeah, you individualize for the individual child and mm-hmm. what that child wants to be able to do. But the basic program is general.
Yeah.
And then we're just going to everybody's got a squat, right? Now after the squat, somebody that's going to wrestle might want to do, lunges with a bag, something like that. So that might be their accessory work for that day. And then the workout might if we have cleans in the workout, the wrestler might get like, bag ground to overhead and over the shoulder as the clean in his workout. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. And Keegan, I'm curious because this is interesting. How old were you when you got your first phone?
Sixth grade. So, but it was so different than a phone now.
Yeah.
Right. Like mine had, it was one of the,
Razor?
like Nokia. No, it was a Nokia deal. Like the battery would last like 7 days, like regardless of what you did.
You could throw it.
It had one game on it. Do you remember that snake game?
Yes.
Dude, it had that and that was it.
Yeah.
Right. That was the only game on it. And so I used it to call people, which I didn't like to do because I was an awkward sixth grader. So it was like, you used it twice a week.
Yeah.
Mom and dad are like calling you to, hey, I'm here at the school to pick you up. And that's it.
Yeah.
Right. And then that transformed into, okay, now I've got the Razor, or like that one, that flip side. I had that one.
So you can kind of be grumpy like us, and you can be like, I remember back in my day.
Yeah, exactly. But it transformed. Right. And so like all of a sudden I'm in high school and I didn't even have a iPhone. I didn't have a smartphone until junior year of high school.
Me neither. Yeah.
Right. And so it's like, I didn't even have that until I was almost 18 anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, I had one when I was in sixth grade, but it was completely different.
Yeah. And the same here. I got my first phone, I think, when I was like 15 years old.
Yeah.
But the thing is like I have young cousins, like they're 6 and 7. They have smartphones and tablets.
Yeah.
I just see these kids walking around all day long like this, right?
Yeah.
And I was playing soccer and all this stuff. So you guys definitely probably have to deal with some challenges with kids that come in and they don't know like how to move. How do you, and what do you guys see with that? Are there like challenges now that you haven't like seen in the past? Is what
Everyone's posture's all messed up.
How long do we have?
Let's go.
So
Ready,
go.
go.
So
30 seconds.
Look, that's not long enough. Look, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, things changed because what kids got was the internet in their pocket. And like what you guys were talking about, you had, who was on the speed dial on the phone? Mom and dad, and your brother. That was it. Now they've got the internet, and what we've got is, movement wise, we're seeing kids come in who are quote unquote athletes, kids who played sports. They're unable to do just common things, like they can't lunge, they can't get up off the ground with one leg. The knee folds in, the back rounds, and they have to push off with their arm. And you try to get them, like you can't do that. They can't skip. And now it doesn't sound like, why do I want a 12-year-old to skip? Well, that's a common movement. And if you can't do that, how can you shuffle sideways, shuffle, forward if you need to, you're missing common human movement. And like, I like to think of it as a library. Like you've got this vast library of human movement, and what we've done with the kids because of what's going on in our culture is we've torn up their library card. Like they just simply can't access this common movement. And on top of that, you have things like Kelly Starrett talks about, and their posture is all wrong. And you can't start a movement if your head is, if you're going to deadlift and your head is stuck in here and you can't get your body in a good position, you're doomed. And now you're going to take that kid and put him into sport. So we've got huge problems. Our program has had to start to address things like the bear crawl. Like it used to be like bear crawl across the room. Now what we've got is kids who can't hold their bodies with their weight of their body in a bear crawl position. You have them ankles collapsed down so that they're going on the inside of their instep when they're going forward. It's like, that's the most bizarre thing. And so we have to teach them how to do it. So you have a 60-year-old guy on the ground going like, take your left hand, put it forward, take your right foot, follow it. And that, so we're going to tie yarn on your hands and we're going to teach you to yellow yarn forward, right?
Wow.
And it's really, really tough. And on top of that though, you have kids who don't have PE, sitting all day in school. Kelly addresses that. Kelly and Julia address that too. You have this head forward posture. You have shoulders rolling in, and so now we're having to take where we didn't have to do mobility work with 6-year-olds before. We're having to go like, look, your head needs to be back this way. This is how you're supposed to stand. Turn, and we need to open up this area, and it is a cultural thing. and unless our culture starts to address that kids need to be outside playing, and we're not saying don't have the games at home. We're not saying don't have the phone. Just if the kid is going to school and not doing PE, coming home and being on his phone, you're going to need to do something, and that is pretty drastic, because you're replacing playtime with screen time.
But that's common, right? Like that's the common issues that we see nowadays. We see the pronated ankle, we see collapsed arch, we see tight spinal erectors, tight hip flexors. We see the head forward, that like T-spine rounding, right? And tight pecs and anterior delta, internal rotation. That's normal now because of all this, right? Like if you think of the average day of a child inside of the US, it's atrocious. It's nasty, dude. Like they get up out of bed, they go sit downstairs and they have sugar, right? Then they get a ride to school. They sit at school all day and they get sugar from their teachers, and then they go to the lunchroom where they have processed carbs, and then maybe they go to recess. Maybe, right? We don't know. It's just, all that stuff's being cut, and they're spending more time in the classroom. They go home. They get a ride home. They sit on their phones. They do their homework, and they eat dinner with their family, and then they go to bed.
Yeah,
that's normal, dude.
And if they have access to the internet, I doubt they're even going to bed.
Right.
Yeah, and then
right.
again,
if they have access to their phone and
or
stuff
at least
like
not well
in their room, like they're going to be up.
Right.
At least not well, right?
Right.
It's crazy.
PE back when I was going through PE, the 60s, 1960s. We had a PE teacher, and the PE teacher exposed us to things like gymnastics, track. So we learned to shot put, in 5th grade. I wasn't good at it, but I learned how to do it. I learned how to do the hurdles. We learned how to vault in gymnastics. We learned how to had a trampoline that they brought in. We learned how to do flips on the trampoline. We learned to climb ropes. We learned the rings. And that was PE. It wasn't about us getting fit, and that's the problem. It wasn't about us getting fit. It was about us being exposed to how to move, so that we could take advantage of everything of all of that movement and apply it out when we played sport, or when we, the hope was that we grow up and be active adults. That's taken out. Now what you have is the 4th grade teacher who may or may not have any interest in athletics or sport, and she's told, you need to run PE for the 4th graders, 2 hours a week. Well, what's that person do? Go outside, run around the track for 10 minutes, run around the track for 15 minutes. That's it. We have lost in this ability or this teaching process. Physical education was a teaching process, and it was something that people chose to go into. The physical education now, the teacher is, let's do some ball sports because that's what's been mandated. Let's go do ball sports, and nothing wrong with that. But if you're in the basketball block and you hate basketball, there's nothing. I'm just not engaged. So
you're not really going to learn anything at that point,
right?
Because you don't care about it.
Right. Now, if you learn how to move well and you can play basketball, and we play basketball as part of a block, that's awesome. But my perspective, PE needs to be reintegrated into schools. People need to understand that the PE teacher is a critical piece of children learning, that they need to be honored. As like you wouldn't say to a algebra class in high school, okay, guys, if you come here and you are, have your shirt on and your pants on and you're sitting in class, you're going to get a C. But you do that with PE, like, dude, you show up and you kind of walk around the gym.
You have the right clothes.
Yeah, have the right clothes on, you're going to get a C. That's denigrating the importance of the profession, physical education teachers.
Have you guys ever presented this to any schools?
Sure.
Is that something you guys are trying to work on to get
it is really
a lot of these concepts into schools?
Very much so. We've worked with the San Francisco School District, worked with a couple school districts in Illinois, and we have a lot of teachers who've gone through what we're doing with our program. We can affect a lot of children by having training centers, having come through the gyms, but we can affect a lot more if PE teachers see the value of what we're doing and pick it up. We're starting a webinar with one of our labs. Lab in Tennessee is run by Dan Quisenberry, who was voted the PE Teacher of the Year last year for Tennessee. So we're having a webinar for teachers, and we're just going to have that a monthly webinar where he gets on and addresses how to implement the program within, how to implement functional fitness, how to teach it within a PE environment versus, from elementary school to middle school to high school.
Yeah, I think people lose out on the part of PE. Yeah, it's supposed to educate you, right? It's
right.
Physical education. You're supposed to learn, and you're supposed to progress.
Right.
But it's just really gone backwards. It hasn't made any progress. It's gotten worse. And you think I realize that people get a little frustrated when people are kind of forced to do these requirements because there's these participation trophies nowadays. But what if just everyone was required to complete a certain distance on the track and things like that, and it progressed more as you went along, or just things like that where it's like some sort of progression that we can kind of see. You can clearly see it in math, and you start out with addition and subtraction, and you progress onward from there, and you can clearly see it kind of everywhere else. But there's not like phases to physical education, and
for some reason we feel like, or our culture feels like, if someone can't achieve this, then what we need to do is move that bar down,
right?
And we lower the bar. And what we found in our gym is the more we raise the bar, the more the kids strove and more kids achieved. And kids would do amazing things, and they'd find real self-confidence because wow, I couldn't climb a rope. Now I can climb a rope, and I worked at that and I got that, and that was awesome. But it's also culture. And when
that's
Keegan
where they start to thrive, really.
Yeah.
After
Keegan was
reaching those goals.
When Keegan was in high school, when we first started the functional fitness thing, our kids started just breaking the records in the high school. So there was in fact, our oldest son Connor, him and his best friend broke, I forget it was, the sit-up record, something. And the athletic director said it's impossible. Made them repeat it, and they broke it again. But Keegan went in, and his goal was to beat their pull-up record, and in the presidential physical fitness or the physical fitness testing. So he went in, he broke their record, and then kept going. And next year comes up in the physical fitness test. Mickey went to help, and so where's the pull-up test? We're going to do a hang this year. Well, why are we doing a hang? Well, because last year Keegan was on the bar so long the other kids got embarrassed and didn't want to try it. And well, shouldn't you have used that as a teaching opportunity to say, look what he can do. Can't you strive for that? That should have been the teaching point. And what we've done, and I think as a society, is go well, that's stellar. Somebody else felt bad, so let's just lower that down. And that's not that doesn't raise good quality adults who are able to deal with. I mean, life's there are people who are better than you at things in life. And
almost no matter what you do, right?
Right. Well, for me, yes. But
I think a big part of society today, we're trying to find ways so that kids don't fail.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Failure is a part of life. But that's not why we want kids to fail, but we want them to fail because there's so much learning that can come from failure, right? There was a quote by Sumner Redstone. It says that success is not built on success. It's built on failure. It's built on frustration, and sometimes it's built on catastrophe. And I think that's totally true. I try to apply that when I'm coaching kids, and now when I'm teaching trainers to coach kids. That there has to be some sort of failure at some point. And they are going to fail, but staying away from that, really what you're doing is you're setting them up for failure in their adult life, right? Because you're going to fail in life. It's going to beat you down at some point, right? You're not going to be successful at everything you try. So giving them a taste of failure in a safe environment to fail inside of the gym is a way to learn in itself too.
Can't imagine not, especially like just like not having that experience when you're younger, like avoiding it at all costs. Because if you're an adult and you never take risks at anything, that would be just a scary life to live.
Right.
But that's the life we're setting them up for.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the life we're
If you
setting them up for.
think of your worst failures, some of those times can be the biggest catapult to success. Right? Because you look back and you're like, wow, that really beat me down. But you know what? It made me better because now I wanted to go out and achieve,
It's a pivot point.
Dude.
Something to move off.
It's a catapult, right?
It really is.
It really is.
When you mentioned like a rope climb, and I'm thinking about like running and different things, and sometimes we put people in a category and say that they can't do it. So I'm sure you guys have had people in the past that really struggled with something. What would it look like if somebody wasn't able to do a rope climb or wasn't able to run a mile? Would you just say, hey, look, just run whatever way you can run? If you got to walk it, whatever way you got to do it. How would you guys approach some of that stuff?
So scaling options for kids. Let's take the rope climb, for example. It's always about what they can do and putting them in the position where they can move perfectly and still have it be difficult. That's always what we try to do is make it so that they're still training hard, but they're still performing perfect movement.
And you want them to progress.
Yeah.
So you have different scaling options, which are really progressions. So you have a kid who's 5'6", 245 pounds, and he can't climb the rope. So you have him lay down on the ground, bring his legs up close to his body, and he can just pull himself to standing. And we're going to use that. Then maybe we're going to have him sit on a box, anchor his legs, and stand up and hold onto the thing, so he can figure out how to anchor his feet and how he can then use his feet and legs to stand. It doesn't have to be just his grip. And then maybe we teach him how to hang for just a second, pull his feet up, and then anchor again, and then climb a little bit. So you have these little bitty successes and little bitty progressions, and we do that with everything. And that's how because it's not important, or it's important that you don't just go walk away and go like, well, we're rope climbing and you're going to have to go do something else, go bench press because
Figure it out.
Figure it out. But it's important to give them to acknowledge the failure. Look, that was tough. You didn't make it. But then give them a way to success and give them a pathway to success. And that's really where you start to build a character of like, I can work hard at this. It may take me 2 years, but if I work hard at it, I'll finally be able to do it. And rope climb is one of those things that we just kind of use because it's always that thing that you see in the movies,
right,
where,
right.
the kid up at halfway up and pees his pants because he can't, he's afraid, whatever. And, but it's important that they have hard things, that they see hard, difficult tasks, that they see that they fail, and it's also important that we provide them a pathway to success.
One thing I've always loved about lifting is that, for the most part, if you're an able-bodied human being, then we can all lift together, because the scaling is just the weight. You're just going to use less weight.
Yeah.
1,000-pound squatter can squat with someone that squats the bar.
Right.
Yep.
You just got to take weight on and off. That's all it really requires. Might take a little bit more time, and it might not be super convenient, but at least you're doing the same thing. And I think that there's something really awesome about that. So when we're talking about training kids, that probably plays into it to some extent when they're doing some of these. You guys mentioned doing some of the basics, doing the bench, the squat, deadlift, things like that. When they're doing these movements, they can obviously you want them to work out in groups so they can push each other, but one kid can look at it and say, man, I really stink at this exercise. I can only handle having 2.5s on each side. And look at some of these other monsters. They got 4 plates on each side, but I'm doing the same thing. Like, they can recognize that. They can see that very clearly.
Yeah. And I think one of the least talked about benefits of the program that we run is mental resilience for kids. We build resilient human beings, people that are able to understand failure and see that they can work hard at something and then achieve it or be successful. And listening to the kids' cues, they say things like that all the time. I suck at basketball, but it's because I can't jump super high. And now you as a coach can approach them and go, hey, let's work on your jump. If you jump super high, you'll be better at basketball. And they know they have a path forward, right? And sometimes it's all about listening to what the kid is saying taking those cues and breaking it down into something that's manageable for them so that they have a pathway to success, you know? So that's super powerful.
You can really change the internal dialogue, by showing them that they can make progress. They might say, rather than them automatically saying, I suck at that, they might say, I'm not that good at that yet.
Yeah,
that's way different.
It's temporary, right? It's not permanent for them. It's something that they know that if they work hard at it, it's temporary. It's not a permanent. I'm always going to be bad at basketball, or I'm never going to bench press this. It's just
talk about
what
it
it
for a
is right
second.
now.
Keegan, talk about the locus of control, because that's really what that is about.
Yeah, locus of control is it's a term that that experts in their field use to it defines how you see experiences. Right, whether they're internal or external. And I think a lot of us nowadays, specifically kids, place blame on everything outside. They don't see that there's internal inputs to experiences as well, And I use the example, if you think back to the hardest time in your life, maybe, a loved one died or something like that, or, you think back to that experience and give yourself a rating from 1 to 10, How well did you move through that experience? 10 meaning it didn't bug you at all. The next day you woke up and you were fine, or 1 being, it still crushes you to this day. But you think back to that hard time and there's external inputs as to what happened, and there's also internal inputs as to what happened. Maybe you're beating yourself up because you didn't give them a call the day before. Maybe you didn't make the 2-hour drive to go and see them, that week prior to them passing. Like there's internal things, but there's also external inputs. And locus of control speaks to how internal or external somebody places blame on experiences. So you got kids inside of your class. Our goal is to develop a healthy locus of control, meaning that they understand that there's both inside and outside, feeding into how they're doing. You'll get kids inside a class that maybe they're playing dodgeball that day. They think that they're like the best dodgeball player in the world. They're pegging everybody, or they're catching all the balls in their mind. But, they've got a teammate that's the best player on the baseball team, and they're just like, they walk away thinking that they're the best. But, you have those discussions as coaches, to actually bring them back to reality in either direction, whether they think the world's out to get them or they think they're the worst, or, you gotta be in tune with that as their coach too. And we talk about that inside of our PYCC as well, pretty in depth.
Have you guys noticed anything with like maybe kids that may have, depressive type disorders? I just remember when I was younger and I started lifting. The reason I started lifting was because of my injury. But after that injury, after I had Auschwitz slaughter and it messed me up, I went to a very, very dark place. And when I was able to start going to the gym and working out, it literally changed my life from that point. Do you guys see a lot of that in terms of improvement with kids that may have mood disorders? People may call it that.
Mental health issues.
Mental
really,
health
right?
issues, yeah.
More of them lately than in the past, but movement helps. Moving helps. And what happens to a lot of people when they're depressed and upset and they see that the world's caved is they stop moving. So you get someone to the gym, just the act of moving, just the act of being around other people and being engaged begins to help, and there's literature on that, and it's
tons of white paper on that. There's
what comes to mind right away is somebody in a hospital.
Right.
Somebody's in a hospital bed and they, even if they just don't move for a day, like they're already getting they're getting a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression starts to
That's the saddest scene in every movie too, right?
Yeah,
the person in the hospital, that's the sad scene.
And the thing they get excited about is walking down the hallway.
Right.
Yeah. Like, I got to walk down the hallway today. They're pumped.
Yeah.
And then you take a immature brain, you're 13 years old, you're 14 years, your nervous system doesn't finish growing until you're 25, 28 years old. Like, and the part that makes good decisions is the part that
might be part of your problem.
It's the part that develops last.
Yeah, the frontal
so you've got
cortex,
a 13-year-old, you've got a 13-year-old kid who's had the thing that defined him. I'm an athlete, taken away from him. Where's the kid going to go?
Yeah, it's really tough.
So, kid who's hurt his knee can come in. He can start to do pull-ups. He can start to do bench press. He can start to push-ups. We can get you on. We can get the kids moving. and get them getting stronger. And they start going like, 13 years old, they start going like, look, I got guns. I'm, and that becomes a big deal, right?
Yeah.
Like I'm starting to be bigger than everybody else. I can do more pull-ups than anybody else in the class. Why? Well, because you couldn't walk because you had you were on crutches, but that was all you could do. But we can provide ways forward, and we can provide things that for kids to find success in, and then they can kind of work their way out of that.
What about so many kids are injured? There's the injury rate is increasing all the time, and you see it a lot with females. What's your take on why a lot of young females athletes are getting hurt and injured?
Yeah. So that's a huge issue, right? Like, and that's one that like everybody wants to talk about, athletes and how good it is to have an athletic kid nowadays. And that might be true, right? Like they're doing more than the average kid, but there's opposite ends of the spectrum, right? You got the average kid. We talked about the average day in the life of a kid inside of the US, right? They're basically sitting all day. So you've got tons of mobility issues, right? And then you apply that to an athlete. Okay, so now this kid's been sitting all day, and then at the end of their day, they've got 2.5 hours where they're doing repetitive motions, maybe poorly. So you've got huge motor pattern issues combined with mobility issues. They're worse off than the kid that's been sitting all day and maybe not even moving,
because they're trying to ask their body to do something that it's not really truly capable of.
It's not capable of it.
Maybe under high stress because it's like a sport or something like that.
Dude, it's not capable of it in many ways, right? Like it's not capable of it in terms of their movement, and it's not capable of it in terms of their strength.
You can't express what you don't possess.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a quote from one of our friends that I'm not going to Kevin Don. It's very true. And so now you're asking someone to express something, and Keegan talks about this, I think, beautifully in our courses, is that you have a kid who's doesn't possess the requisite movement patterns, the safe movement patterns. He's also been sitting all day, so he's got mobility issues, and you say, okay, go out there and play soccer. What's going to happen?
And
Oshkosh Slaughters is the best, is a great scenario, because what's coming down the pike is a lot worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what comes to mind for me is just over the years, just hearing the different dialogue people have developed, to try to explain some of this stuff is, these athletes, they may grow pretty tall at a young age. Mm-hmm. And then also with females, they have the Q angle. The knees are kind of slanted inward from where the hip is. But kind of in both cases, you end up with longer limbs, basically longer arms, longer legs, and that leads to a lot of shoulder injuries and leads to a lot of knee injuries. But the truth of it is neither one of those things are actually causing the problem. What's causing the problem is exactly what you guys mentioned, was the fact that they don't move very well and that they're not strong enough to handle the body that they have. So the height is making everything a little bit worse, because it's harder for that person to move. Because they have mobility issues, right. Perhaps, but the real problem is they just don't know how to move well.
As a teen trainer, somebody training young teens, 12 to 15 years old, you have to watch out for that growth spurt, the peak height and weight velocity when that occurs. You got to, and you need to understand that when that occurs, kids will become what you call uncoordinated. And so then they become unsafe under load. So we need to back off the weights. We need to work on the movement patterns. But that's a short period of time. Back in the day, kids would go through their growth period. They'd be awkward for 2, 3, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. And then all of a sudden, bam, they're back on the field and they're just fine. Now you combine all of the things that you talked about earlier, plus the growth spurt, and you've got real problems, because you've got a kid who's going like, well, now I've got a new body. I didn't know how to work the old one. I got it now, and
it potentially changes on a weekly basis,
right? Which makes you as a teen trainer, it's really important. You got to look at each client and go like that. That's not just one kid. That's 100 kids, because every time that kid comes in the gym, they're going to be different. So you can't just go, well, last week Keegan squatted 225 by 5 and it was awesome. So Keegan, go grab the bar, load 135 up and warm up. You got to go, let's get you under a PVC. Let me see if you can get depth. Let me see what happens when you're doing, when you're a few reps with PVC. Okay, that's cool. Yeah, you can, you're moving well. So now I know that he's got the ability to move through the range of motion that I want him to do and keep himself, unloaded that way. Now the only thing that's going to be affecting him is the load, because But this is problematic because these kids have been all the problems you talked about. Then they get specialized in a sport, so they're only doing that one sport, and now you've got them launching into their growth spurts, and they're playing sports in a way that even professionals aren't. So they're playing 365 days a year. Professional sports, they have to take a season, they have to take an off season. And you got these kids playing 365. They're playing, five nights a week. They're playing, 2 hours a night as a practice, and they play, tournaments all weekend long. What do you, just standing back from the problem, what do you think is going to happen?
What's a way that you guys get some people to progress with range of motion? With these young kids coming in, let's just say it's day one for a 12-year-old kid that comes through the door, and you guys are talking to him about these different movements you want to have him try. I'm sure there's like a little bit of an assessment that you kind of view, and you get an idea of how they move and everything. How do you get them to move better? Is there a lot of stretching involved, or how do you get better mobility?
Depends on the age group. But Keegan mentioned earlier, I'll let him talk about progressions and things, but that we start really with learning how to brace, learning how to neutralize your spine. Internal stability provides the structure for external mobility.
Yeah, and we've seen that demonstrated in some of Kelly's Tourette's seminars where, Kelly would show someone's hamstring length. He'd have them lay on their back, and he would move their leg around, and their hamstring length wouldn't be that great. Their mobility would be very limited. He would teach them how to breathe. He'd teach them how to brace, and he'd move their leg, and it would increase
it's like
there on
sorcery.
the spot.
Sorcery. You ever seen those copper bands? Like somebody will put a copper band on you, all of a sudden you're
the crowd would literally go, "Oh,
wow!"
Everybody would be.
You know what?
Awesome.
The hamstring didn't get longer,
right?
But the body said, "You know what? I can let it go further because I'm now protected."
Yeah.
And then we have progressions for every movement that we go through.
Yeah. We break them down into what we call movement skills, and movement skills they're static portions of movement that can't be broken down any further. They can be done in a held position, so bracing, hinging at the hip, external rotation of the femur at the hip. These types of things, they can't be broken down any further, but they're foundational to every other movement that you're going to try, either inside a sport or inside of the gym. And so that's where we start. And we start that at a really young age, but we also start it whenever they show up. So if we have a 14-year-old that shows up, guess what we're learning today? We're learning how to control your breathing, control your spine, and we're learning how to hinge, because that's going to apply to nearly everything else that you do. And we might do that in the form of the squat that day, but we're going to limit range of motion so that he can perfect those movement skills inside of that movement itself. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So it's a progression in terms of, can you perform these movement skills throughout a full range of motion? If the answer is yes, then we start to load it. And then all of a sudden, when you have kids that have been practicing these movement skills, doing it perfectly, applying it to movement patterns, all of a sudden you can combine movement patterns into really complex movements, load those movements, and they're going to just excel in terms of their athleticism.
And on top of all that, is there some stretching that still goes on after training or before training?
Yeah. The stretching itself. Because we have all those issues, just based on their lifestyle now, kids are, they're sitting all day. So you've got common issues that need to be addressed. And so, inside of what we do with the Brand X method, all of our classes are, we prepare the kids, we practice movement, and then we play. And that looks different for those different stages of development, our explore, express, excel. But inside of prepare, there's some stretching. And there might be stretching after class or before their practice as well, based on their sport. But inside of prepare portion of every single class, we stretch.
In the teen years, or the excel years, we divide the classes up into conditioning and strength classes. So we have a strength class, which might have a little conditioning afterwards, and we have a conditioning class, and might have a little strength in it. But typical strength class is, we have the 30 kids, we have the 40 kids, we know what their problems are. So we've assigned, this kid's got some dorsiflexion problems. Come in, I want you to do some work on your ankle before you start. So that kid's got some 5 minutes of individualized mobility. Then we go through a warm up. and then it's just a standardized warm up that kind of, goes through all of the movement patterns and warms them up for lifting. And then we do 5 more minutes of generalized mobility work. Then we do our lifts. Then we do our accessory work. Might do a little bit of conditioning piece that involves like a prowler push and farmer carry or something like that. And then generalized mobility as well. For what did we do that day? We did deadlift. Let's do some lat stretch and some thoracic spine mobility, something like that.
I think an important piece that we try to include inside of our training often is just putting kids into positions and having them stay in that position. So for instance, the bottom of the squat, right? Even just a relaxed position. Why? Because new range of motion is weak range of motion. And so if our goal is really to get kids strong so that they're safe and they can apply it to whatever sport or move throughout their life that they choose, then we have to put them in those positions eventually. So it's not that we're avoiding a full range of motion. What we're avoiding is doing it dynamically or under load until they're ready for it. We'll put them in that position with just their body weight, and we'll have them sit there and struggle. Why? Because they need to. They need to open up that way.
Yeah, the only strong position they're strong in is looking at their phone, right?
Yeah.
Their body's ready for it at all times.
They're because of the movement problems, because the lack of movement, we're seeing people who are kids who just have dysfunctional movement patterns. And then with the increasing obesity, you have kids now coming in who are, it was 10 years ago we'd see the kid come in who was very overweight. That was unusual. Now we're seeing it quite a bit. Most kids are a little bit overweight. I'm not saying that they're obese, but most of the kids coming in are could be moving more, could be eating better, and it's problematic. So we have to address mobility. When in the past we used to say that we in the younger groups, in the the express group, 8 to 10 or 8 to 12, and then the younger groups, that we would do mobility to build the habit of doing mobility. But now we're finding that they need the mobility. Well, saying to a 6-year-old, wow, we need to do the couch stretch. And it's painful, and you're going to have to sit there. It's a miserable thing to be doing with the kids, but we are now having to do it because they can no longer. Most of the kids can no longer open their hip.
Yeah, one of the things I couldn't believe when I was working in high school, and this is 6 or 8 years ago, somewhere in there, was how tight their hamstrings were, and how much that limited everything that they could do. I was like completely baffled. I'm like, what the hell do I like? I had all these ideas of how I was going to go in and like train these kids, and I was going to have them do the West Side method, and then I started having them like move, and I was like, I'm like, oh my God, I got to teach him how to move first. I can't have him like trying to lift heavy weights. They're going to kill themselves. Right. Because they couldn't squat down even, a few inches above parallel without their back rounding over, because the hamstrings were pulling on their lower back so much. I was
first thing you did was hamstring stretch with chains, right?
That's right. And bands.
Chain that puppy up in bands.
Yeah, that was kind of a huge shock. I was like, whoa, okay. Yeah. Like, are we going to take a step back?
I think I think the problem is, so you talk about the hamstring length, that usually happens after that period of long bone growth, right? Where they go through that giant growth spurt and then the muscles can't keep up.
Yeah.
And then, they'll address it a little bit with some light stretching, but that's usually the only type of stretching that they do, is that like hamstring, like posterior chain type stretching. Why? Because that feels good and it's easy.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then it's like, it's passive, right? You can kind of fall into it. Whereas like that anterior chain stretching hurts, dude. Right. Like it sucks, right? Like sitting in the couch stretch sucks. Why? Because it's a completely like you can't just sit there passively and let it happen.
Oh, and trying to like open up and bring your arm up over your head and everything. Dude, it's
terrible,
torturous.
Right? It's terrible. So like convincing a 6-year-old now that he's got to do that is really, really hard, right?
Look, man, your dad wants you to get a scholarship. Okay?
Exactly.
Yeah. You got to do the stretch. There's a lot of money on the line right here.
Where do I put the band?
right. And then you put the band on them and the kid goes flying across the room.
Birds.
Yeah, like Angry Birds with the kids. No, let's not do that.
But that's hard, right? Like that's a hard conversation to have, but it's absolutely necessary to what we're doing. And I think that is crucial to in order to put them into the proper positions that we're asking of them. You can't actually get a kid into the proper position unless they can actually achieve that position. And so, yeah, absolutely, we start stretching, and we started at as young as 3 years old now, because 3 years old they might be super bendy, but what we've seen in terms of their lifestyle now is that it changes really quickly. So it starts really young now for us.
We've had the opportunity recently to work with some kids who are really overweight. So, 14-year-old, 15-year-old boy who weighs 500 pounds. And we were shocked to find out that kids, that there was obese, then there's morbidly obese. And now they talk about these kids who are super morbidly obese. And they have no opportunity to move, because it's tough, and their body starts to morph, to change to support the weight. And so how do you work with these kids? So we had these
automatically talking about some mental disorders probably right off the bat, because the kid can't be social, and I mean it just puts them in such a bad position.
Right, it's horrible, and they feel badly about themselves. They're embarrassed, and all of these things.
Yeah,
it's
brutal.
It's a horrible situation. We had these doctors come to us from St. Louis, and they said there's nothing out there to help these kids move. And they said all of the weightlifting or all of the weight management programs out there are designed around things like, okay, so get on the treadmill and run for 30 minutes. And we're like, really, that's the best you can do. And the doctors said, we want to design something. Can you help us design something? And so we said, well, the first thing I would do is I would have them power lift. I'd have them deadlift, squat, bench press, and maybe press overhead a little bit.
You're like, I've seen Mark Bell do that, and he's pretty fat.
Well, that was I did try to call you several times, but
we're using your transformation photos.
Yeah,
not easy to get a hold of sometimes.
Yeah. So we built this program around them deadlifting, back squatting, pressing, and that was kind of the start of the program. Then we had to start to work on this dysmorphic movement. Like, how do you get somebody who weighs 500 pounds to put his knee in a safe position and squat? Well, let's start squatting to a 24-inch box with PVC. Oh, you can't do it with PVC because they can't get their hands here. So now we've got, a bar with bands on it so they can hold the bar here, and they're sitting up and down with 24-inch box, and you just slowly lower that over time. We ran a 4-month trial on the program. It really went well. We ended going to St. Louis.
We ran a powerlifting meet for them. That was pretty cool.
Right. And it was really cool because all these kids, there was 13 kids in the trial run. They're starting another one in like 2 weeks they're hoping for twice that number. But we went to this powerlifting meet, and all the kids lifted, and they had probably 30 people in the crowd. And so I thought, speaking of the mental state, first time these kids have done anything athletic where people were standing and cheering, and they're walking off, they'd squat, and then everybody's standing and cheering.
Awesome. That's really cool.
And give me chills still today to think about it. Young lady walked out, and I remember she walked out and she said, I feel like I can lift the world today.
Oh, wow.
And so it's awesome. It's an awesome change in their way. They think the program is called Teen Lift. And
how can people find out more information about that?
It's they have a web
their Facebook page, maybe or something?
Facebook page, Teen Lift.
Cool.
They've got an Instagram profile as well. Yeah, right. Teen Lift stands for Life Improving Fitness Toolkit.
Right. It's fantastic. But these two doctors just kind of spearheaded this idea that what we want to do is get kids to, we like what you guys are saying about moving well, but how can we do that with these older kids or these kids who are overweight? And we were just like, well, running on a treadmill certainly isn't going to get them.
If you're overweight, that's the last thing you want to do, right? But you got to get some sort of success in terms of your athletics, right? And that brings us back to that story of Nick, inside of our teens class, having that successful 300-pound lift at 13 years old. That set him on a different trajectory for the rest of his life because he had success there,
And these surgeons, they're they're bariatric surgeons, pediatric surgeons who are now being asked to do bariatric surgery on 12-year-olds.
Wow.
And they're like, we don't want to do that.
Right.
They
put us out of work, please. Right.
right.
Yeah.
That's really what they were saying. The bariatric surgery is the only thing that saves these kids' lives.
Did they run any tests on these kids? Like, first of all, they must have had some sort of testing on them to know that it was safe enough for them to exercise.
So
right?
here was a cool, yeah.
And then did they do any tests on them kind of afterwards to see like, how it increased their blood work or anything like that?
Sure they have. All these kids, one of the things that I was told was that these kids came out of a hospital
Shit,
program.
that's great.
Isn't that crazy?
That was awesome.
That's pretty sweet, huh?
He moved well too. Shoot.
Yeah.
So these kids came out of a hospital program. And what was interesting is they have to go through this hospital program to get the surgery. And all these kids had come through the program and then quit. And they were getting like, I think 90% attendance rate throughout the entire program. And these were kids who had quit the program at the hospital. So they do have, I'm sure they do have blood work and stuff on it.
What's the how do you guys see this like scaling over time? Like, do you guys see like a brand X being on every corner in every type of school, or what do you guys want to see?
Yes, please.
Yes.
And every school would be great, man.
Every school.
I'd love for kids to be doing this nationwide. I think that would be beautiful. But in terms of our training centers, one of the things that we pride ourselves on is that our training centers mean a lot to us, and we can't give individual attention to a million training centers. And so, and also what we've seen inside of the fitness community is that, you give the opportunity to use your name, somebody pays you to use your name. We've seen it happen over and over again that people, will train up underneath you as a coach, and then all of a sudden take half your clientele and open up right next door. Right. That's something that we definitely don't want to have happen. And we don't want to encourage that inside of our community. So our training centers have territories. It's based on population of where they're at. But they've got a certain territory where, hey, as long as you're a training center and you're following our best practices, you're following our guidance, and, you want to be a part of this with us, you want to run with us, then, you're not going to have somebody step on your toes. This is your area.
We have monthly webinars. We have mentoring. We watch their social media, so we see what they're posting, and are the kids safe? Are the kids, are you following the protocols that we've asked you to follow? If you are, then we want you to be part of us.
Yeah, this is so cool to watch.
So that's what we were talking about.
Yeah.
Just limit the range of motion. And they started with higher boxes.
Yeah.
Now they're,
these kids, they got some challenges, right? But there's a lot of people that aren't built that way, that just can't move like that anyway, that are just at a desk job, that just, they've let their body deteriorate over the years. And they've had a lot more choices, a lot more opportunities than these kids. So that's pretty amazing to watch.
The thing that I find a couple things. One is that I find the social stigma for these kids offensive. That this kid who's 5'10", weighs 500 pounds, has chosen to be 5'10", 500 pounds. It's not a choice. It's not because he's
they say fat and lazy.
Right. That's not okay. These are kids who just genetics play a part in this, and it's just they've got everything stacked against them. So I find that let's try to remove that from them. Secondly, we have some really good trainers there.
Being judgmental is not going to help. You know what I mean? Being judgmental against them is not going to help them. No. You know what I mean?
No, what they need to have is success,
right?
And they need to have support, and they need people to be going like, "Look, this is awesome what you're doing, and this is awesome." On the second topic, or the second point was, we flew out to St. Louis and we did a little 2-day seminar on movement with the coaches that did this. We have one of the doctors went through, Jose Greenspan and Justin Harris, and they lead. He's a school teacher at a school in St. Louis, and they went through school, isn't it? They went through the program and understood that you don't hurry people through the beginning process. And so what he got those kids learning was, well, where do you put your knees when you squat? What do you sit back when you squat? And let's lift the box up high enough that you can actually sit back. And you get to the place where you're sitting back and your knees are traveling out. Now let's lower down an inch. Let's lower down an inch. And
you guys ever have those, you guys ever have parents that come and they're like, I only want my kid doing conditioning because I don't want to stunt their growth lifting weights. Do you ever deal with that animore?
I love that.
yeah.
You still have to?
I love that. Like we're going to have a bunch of really strong, short people.
Yeah.
You know?
Only dwarves come out of Brand X, right?
Yeah.
Tell them about Cole.
Yeah, Cole. Oh, that's a good story, man. He's 6'3". He's one of my training partners coming through our program. So he started lifting with us. Cole was really overweight when he started, and he was like 5'4". Sprouted up, obviously.
Weighed 235.
To 6'3", and about the same weight, if not a little bit less, when he was at the end of our work with him.
With
but
198
at 15 years old, he pulled the California state record. It was just under 500 pounds. 15 years old, under 5, just under 5. Yeah, it was really strong kid. Really, and I mean like 6'3". You know, at that age, you're not supposed to pull that far. You know.
Yeah, it's a distance.
He had legs that were like this long, and his body was like this.
That's great.
Yeah,
perfect for sumo deadlift, right?
Yeah,
perfect. It was really interesting. It was really interesting.
How have you guys over the years dealt with parents, and how do you teach some of these coaches to deal with parents? Like, have you ever gotten yourself into like a predicament where a really overzealous parent was like, hey, you know, you hurt my son, or you know, I don't like them doing this, or they got too sore, or something like that?
Sport parents, you know, kid, you know, playing, you know, a game on or a tournament on Saturday, Sunday, and comes in and now he's sore and it's your fault. And well, to be fair, I may not appreciate the way the coach is or the parents coming at me,
Right.
but I do have to go that as a coach, my responsibility is to understand what my kids are doing. So if they have tournaments playing on the weekend, I should have been more aware, and that happens rarely. But the idea, one of the things we talk about in our course, and one of the things that we implemented so much in our practice was talking to the kids. So kids come in, you know, I want, you know, part of the requirement was you come over, shake hands with the coach, and then there was a minute of us talking, like, hey, how you doing? What's going on? How's school today? What'd you have for breakfast? That kind of thing. And in that time, I should find out.
I got a competition on Saturday.
Yeah. Hey, got a competition on Saturday, and
Don't kill me, coach.
right. So you know what you're going to do today? You're going to do a little running. You're going to do a little bit of, you know, something else, and we're going to light stuff, and we're going to do some mobilization. I don't want to take you away from your peer group and having fun with your buddies, but we're going to do that. On the other side of that, we heard a story recently of I think it was 6th grade kids going to a water park. They're going to go to a water park on a Friday, and one mother said, "My kid can't go because he's playing baseball on the weekend." You know, that's insane, right? You know, going to go with my friends. My friends are having a party at the water park, and my kid can't go because he's going to play, you know, baseball over the weekend. Well, that's insane. You know, why we all do all of the sporty stuff that we do is so that they can go have fun. Like,
Yeah.
you know, so there, you know, there's got to be some metric on the insanity. One is that I do, as if a kid's in my gym, I got to have responsibility for him. On the other is, you know, parents, let's back off here. Let's, you know, and that kind of sweeps into, like, we had kids who powerlifted, you know. Parents, you see powerlifting parents say, my 9-year-old set the national record. Nobody cares. And, you know what? It's 9 years old. We don't want to necessarily need to rank all of our kids as the top 10 baseball players at 11 years old. That's we're setting unrealistic expectations on the child. And what's that say about where your head is when you're trying to accomplish that?
Let's say somebody, you know, walks into one of these facilities and sees, you know, it's a max effort, you know, deadlift day, and everyone's going nuts in there, and a new parent walks in with their kid, and they're, you know, kind of like, you know, is this going to be safe for my kid? Like, maybe their kid's kind of undersized and stuff, so they got some real concern. You know, is this going to be okay for my kid? How do you kind of explain some of that to them?
Yeah, so that kind of ties back in with what Nsima asked, right? Like, Dude, growth plate injuries. And that's like, you make a post on Instagram even now of a kid lifting a weight and you get 10 people that comment like, oh, you're going to stunt their growth. Right?
I wonder where that
It's one of the most frustrating things as a coach ever is
maybe because bodybuilders are short.
So it started, it actually started a couple hundred years ago. The researchers went into London and they measured the height of people in central London. They asked them, do you lift heavy weights? The common answer was no. And then they went to the coal mines outside of central London. They measured the coal miners' height. And the common answer to do you lift heavy weights was yes, because they're mining coal. The coal miners happened to be shorter. They were hired because they could fit into the coal mines. And the science that went into that was, if you lift heavy weights, you're going to stunt your growth. There was a study done where medical records inside of the U.S. were looked at between 1974 and 1990. And there was a series of 6 injuries due to weightlifting in kids to the growth plate. The epiphyseal plate. The fractures to the epiphyseal plate happen because of acute injury. They don't happen because of repetitive stress. So some things like car crashes, right? Or like if I slip and fall down the stairs, like and I hit and I land a certain way, it's an acute injury. It's not repetitive stress. All 6 of those injuries happen during a bench press or a overhead press. And so you can imagine the situation, right? A kid trying to get swole in his basement, which I could totally appreciate, but having weight come crashing down on them, right. All 6 of those injuries were done without supervision and they were done with unknown load. So the kid didn't even know how much weight they were trying to lift, So that argument is like super frustrating as a coach, but I can totally appreciate from a parent's perspective, them walking into a class and going like, man, is this safe for my child?
It's intense.
So the answer is we turn Keegan loose on him. That's
Cole.
That's Cole.
Yeah.
Jeez.
That's at the Arnold. That was 430. No, that's 485.
That was 485, yeah.
So I think the other piece is, walking into class.
Mm-hmm.
In our class, we have 4 basically platform groups. There may be more platforms going on, but 4 groups. First group is our barbell prep group, and they're 8 to 10, and all they're doing is learning how to move. We have our rookie group, and they're kind of mimicking. This can be anywhere from 12 to 18. Everybody starts in the rookie group. I don't care if you're a 16-year-old, 300-pound, lineman from the football team. You come in, I got to know how you squat.
Yeah.
So you're going to start on the rookie platform. Those two platforms are generally just learning to move. So they're not lifting heavy loads ever. Mm-hmm. They're learning how to squat. They're learning how to pick stuff up off the ground. They're learning how to press. And so we're doing high number of reps, low weights. Next group up is JV. They're starting to explore weight. But you've worked your way through this now. Then you have the varsity group, and they're lifting heavy weights. In our gym, we had over 100 state and national records in powerlifting before we closed it from the teen group. And so our kids lift heavy, but we never felt we weren't developing powerlifters. We were developing athletes. Yeah. So we didn't do 1 rep max days. The most our kids ever did was a by 3. Uh-huh. And then we would walk onto the platform and they would start with whatever their by 3 was on a meet and move up. So there wasn't really generally ever a 1 rep max day going on. Once in a while we would do it just for fun, but then 1 rep max to us was qualified by when does the technique break down, not when the lift is broken. So if I see a kid lifting perfectly, his knees are in line and he squats 300 and we go to 325 and his knees start to wobble, I go, we're done, right?
Yeah.
Because that knee wobble isn't going to get better when we go to 350. And then when we go to 375 and he finally stands up with 395 and he goes like, yay, it's a 1 rep max, ignore the technique. Well, I don't want to ignore the technique because I know it started back at 305. And you just decided you were going to keep going up. So our 1 rep max was within tolerance of technique starting to break down. So, and one of the things we always said is, what changes with weight? Speed. That's it.
It seems like Brand X is going to be like our our Olympic development program. You know how China and Russia, they take these young children and they breed them to be competitors. I feel like that's
Make
what
a
you
bunch
guys are
of
doing.
mutants.
Yeah.
You guys are doing that in a much more humane way.
Well, they get to go home with
I-3,
their they get to go home with their parents. They get to go
Yeah,
home with
they
their
get to
parents.
go home with their parents.
Yeah.
Oh
You
man.
don't get to just put them on lockdown. You got any questions over there, Andrew?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like to motivate kids to exercise, you kind of almost don't call it exercise, right? At least for my daughter, I know if I say, hey, let's go to the park and do push-ups or something, it's like, I'm not going to do that. But if I say, hey, let's go throw your skates on, let's go have fun and whatnot, and then she's all for it. Have you guys, since you guys have been around kids so much in your experience, are there any like trigger words or maybe actions that
Little
totally...
tricks.
Yeah, well, I mean, definitely I want to ask that, but like that will totally deflate the kid, because like I feel like if I do, like I'll tell my nephew like, hey, if you want to play video games, you got to do like 10 push-ups right now. And he hears push-ups and he's like, I don't even want to play video games anymore.
Right.
So is there something that parents should like try to avoid doing or saying?
Number one, using exercise as punishment. And I think that's a huge thing inside of our culture nowadays that people do. It's like, oh, you did this wrong at practice, go take a lap. You showed up late, go take a lap. You didn't dress out for PE, take a lap, and that's common now. And the first thing that kids are going to do is start to revolt against that specific exercise. Inside of the fitness community, you show up late for class, it's, 10 burpees, 15 burpees, whatever, however many minutes you were late in burpees. Using punishment with exercise, it's going to pair those two things together for kids. Inside of their mind now, that movement means I'm in trouble, right? Or if I have to do that to earn this, then I'm going to start to avoid that movement altogether. So the way you word things becomes really important. Inside a class, instead of, if you get hit with the dodgeball, it's not, you got to move out and you're out of the game and you got to do 10 squats and then you come back into the game. It's, you got hit with the dodgeball, move to the left, you get to do five burpees, and then you get to go right back in, right? It's like a little incentive then to keep playing rather than, oh, you're out of the game and now you have to stay out. You got to do this exercise that you hate. And then it's all a negative experience. So the way that you word things is really, really important with kids.
I think coaches too. I think there's a very difference between coach and a parent. So if you're a parent and you say, okay, we're going to go out in the garage to do push-ups, the kid's going, I don't want to do that. Hey, come out in the garage. We're going to throw the ball around, and every time we drop, we're all going to do push-ups. So I'm going to do push-ups with you, or you're going out in the garage and working out. Kids, especially younger kids, want to do what dad or mom's doing. They'll do it with you. So it's the commercial. Stand up in the commercial. We're going to do 10 squats and 5 push-ups. The young kids will think that's fun. And then that's a habit they start to get into. We had a bag hanging in the backyard. I'd hit the bag. I'd go out. I'd watch my kids. My kids were out there hitting the bag. It's just, so there's a difference between being in the gym and motivating them and how you speak in the gym. And then there's a difference between being a parent and just living that life and being active. We go to the park. We kick the ball around. Every once in a while we drop and do 5 push-ups. Limit the number of push-ups you're doing. So we're going to drop and do 50 push-ups. Yeah, we do. 6-year-old's doing his 50 push-ups so he can get back on the ball. That's not.
But I think it's really important to note that exercise pairs with whatever you pair it with. If it's not fun for the kid, then exercise is no longer fun for them for the rest of their life. I can think back to when we were training high intensity and doing functional fitness, and even now. Dude, those clocks that sit on the wall, those red LED clocks, and it's got the countdown from 10 down to 1. And once it gets to 3, it's got loud beeps. It's like beep, beep, beep. If I hear those beeps, dude, my heart, even now, I'm not even kidding you, dude. Like my heart, I start sweating. Like I'm not even doing the workout, right? And like I have this like reaction to when I was. And that's going to be forever. I know it. It's like PTSD almost from like trying to push myself to exercise to the point of when I was puking, that's not fun. And that's not fun for kids, right? So putting that much pressure on them in whatever way, whether it's, you got to do this exercise before you can do this, or, using exercise as punishment, just understand that you're pairing that with it, right? And that experience is going to carry through to the rest of their life. So that's really,
Yeah, with my own kids, they know every time we go, it's just 10 minutes from my house. Every time we go to downtown Davis, that we're going to go on a walk. They already know, like, we're probably going to go eat. We might get some yogurt, might get some frozen yogurt afterwards, but they know that there's going to be a walk after dinner every single time.
Yeah.
It's just what we do, and we do it as a family. And there's never been a time where they like really resisted it. There's been a few times where they're like, "Oh, do we really have to go this way?" Because they know I'm going way out of the way to make the walk a little longer. There's been a little bit of that, but I'm like, yeah, well, this is the route to get to the yogurt, Yeah. And so so it's at the end of the trail.
Yeah. What about transitioning into like resistance or strength training? Going from kind of playing games to get them to do a couple push-ups here and there to like, hey, today we're actually gonna try to see, what your form is with like under a PVC pipe or something like that.
We utilize that as actually an incentive, because what we found is that the kids look up to the older kids in the class that are on the barbells, and to take what he was mentioning earlier, with the intimidation factor of 1 rep maxes and all of that stuff, the heavy days, if a kid comes in and he's scared, or mom and dad are scared of their child's well-being, that class is invite only. And it's because we need to see that they're, number one, they're mature enough that they can actually pay attention during a set of deadlifts or a set of squats, that they can listen and apply to coaching cues, and that they can work hard, right? So they start inside of our S&C classes regardless. So I think that's something to, say too, is that it's invite only. But we use it as an incentive. All of the kids that are young inside of our programs, they look up to the kids that are on the barbells. They want to be them, whether it's a young lady watching a female that she looks up to deadlift 300 for the first time, or a young guy watching a kid on the platform, squat over 400 pounds. Both of those kids are inspired then to get there, and they know the path is really clear to get there.
It's an invitation to get under the bar. Like we don't start there. We start with block squats. We start with box air squats. We start with goblet squats. Then, and then we slowly move into that. And once they've shown that they can do those things, well, now we can get on the bar. But what they want, and then we go through that whole process of starting the rookie platform, go to the JV platform, go to the varsity platform, and as Keegan said, they want to be the kid over here. Everybody wants to be that kid. And what we do is we start to pair the idea of moving well with getting more load. So by the time the kids get to the JV platform or the varsity platform, they walk off the platform. The first thing they say is, how did it look? Not did I miss, not did I look, I got the weight up. I did it 5 times like you asked. It's always, how did it look? And the first rep has to look like the last rep. And if it, other than it can slow down. And if it doesn't, then you don't get more weight next week. So every kid wants more weight, right?
Right.
Every kid down here wants to be these kids. So they're learning that they need to move really well and focus on that, which is a whole
building
thing,
culture,
which is a whole thing unto itself. I mean, if you've got a 12-year-old, teaching him to focus through a set of 5, you can't put weight on his back if he can't focus through the set of 5. So you got to teach him not just the good movement, but also the mental state of, from the time I approach the bar to the time I put the bar back in the rack, I'm concentrating, and you got to teach them that. And that's got to be something that they walk off the platform going like, what did it look like? It looked great. I get to go up 2.5 pounds next week.
Right.
And then you end up over here. And then over here, we're just, 5 pounds a week. Just,
you mentioned box squats. You guys utilize box squats to kind of like a place where you start. And if so, why the box squat?
So we talked about that concept of movement skills, right? Static positions that can't be broken down any further. One of those positions is knee travel. And what we found, because kids tend to be tighter inside of the hip flexors, and they got the hip tilt from sitting all day, they tend to be a little bit more quad dominant inside of their squats. And so one of the first variations that we teach them before we progress to an air squat is just unloaded box squat. And we use the box as a tactile cue to get them to sit further back into their hamstrings and utilize it for support. Why?
So it's
because
almost like a little bit of a balance thing.
Yeah, well, it's teaching them to gain strength and actually sit into sit into their hamstrings while the box is there to catch them. So it's kind of a safety net to get them to move at least in the right direction with their hips.
Right.
So it's teaching one of those movement skills.
So with the younger kids, in Mickey's class, they'll take a box that's just below the knee, and they'll say, put the corner there, and they'll put the kids' calves right up against the box, and they'll say, keep the calves on the box and sit back, where your knees can't travel forward and continue. And so they'll lift the box up until that's what the kid can do.
We can draw chalk. We put chalk marks on the box too. So if the calves come in contact, the kids will come off, and like the kids can visually see, oh, I was able to keep my calves on because I've got chalk on my calves.
With the older kids, it's take a 6 inches away from the box, and I want you to try to sit all the way to the back end or back side of the box, that kind of thing. But what it teaches them is to most of the kids have no idea what the backside of their body's supposed to do.
Yeah.
Right.
And so you've got to get them sitting way, way back, and it's a safety net.
So as you transition into a regular squat, they're still going to drive the knees forward, I would imagine, right? Especially to like get below parallel.
Yeah, at some point, right? But you can visualize it almost as an overcorrection, right? We're utilizing the box to get strength inside of the posterior chain, which they've never had,
right,
and get away from excessive knee travel forward and a complete disengagement of the posterior chain.
And in the worst cases, it's sit on the box, put your feet where you need you to be, get your body in the right position. Okay, now stand up. Good. Now sit back on the box.
Right.
And really that's it seems like very basic, but if you don't start there, you'll never get there.
Yeah. So many things can be addressed just by watching that, because you can see the knees collapse in,
Right.
and you could see them sometimes sit on the box and they'll adjust their feet almost naturally.
Right.
And then they'll move their feet to a position that makes more sense for them. And then you have to kind of continue to tell them not to drive their knees forward. But for the most part, they get it. And just like that video, they're allowed to have some deviation from like perfect form, which is great too, because when I was teaching people how to squat through these seminars, that was the hardest part and that's what shocked me the most was most of the dysfunction actually came from the upper body, and the lower body wasn't usually that big of a problem. Every once in a while I'd have tight hamstrings or hips or something like that, but so much of the dysfunction came from the upper body, and they had to really tilt the body way, way forward,
Right.
Just to get anywhere on a squat.
Because they have no strength back here.
Right. They got nothing to push into, really.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so if we start there, then when we move to the air squat, what we see is a lot less forward knee travel, because now they've kind of got a hint. Okay, I'm supposed to sit way back here like this, and so they'll start and we would bifurcate the movement. Like, okay, what I want you to do is I want you to just sit your hips back. Now start to bend your knees and sit down.
Right.
And so they get okay, and that would start to help the forward knee travel quite a bit.
When they're doing that, are they actually sitting on the box too, or are they kind of like doing like a touch and go, or just kind of depends on how far along they are?
Yeah, it depends how far along they are. We'll get kids that when they get down to the box, they've got no support, so they just kind of flop, and then you'll see them kind of scoot their knees forward a little bit and then stand up, which is cool. That's that's their starting point. We might need to raise the box up a little bit, and we'll also have kids that are just touch and go, and that's kind of where they're at for now. Ultimately, we like to say sit about 3/4 of your body weight onto the box, so they're getting a nice kind of deep sit into that full range of motion, and then they're driving up, but they're staying engaged as they sit to the box is really what the goal is.
Yeah, I've always loved the box squat as a teaching tool.
Yeah.
And especially like without the bar on your back, you get to kind of put your hands out in front of you. You mentioned a goblet squat, which is also a great way to learn how to squat, because now we got a counterbalance out in front of us.
Yeah.
Our progression is the block squat, where they have the feet together and just learn to push their hips back and their knees out. And you go down only as far as you can keep your feet flat in the ground. Then we go to the box squat. Then we move to the air squat. And then before we load them with a bar, we go to the goblet squat. And that air squat and goblet squat can kind of be interchangeable there, because it's we found the goblet squat starts to fix problems too, because of the counterbalance and the
Right, and they're able to kind of like sit down in position and stretch it, which is something you pointed out earlier. If you get them familiar with positions, now they're going to be stronger in them.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You mentioned the culture with Brand X, and like we've always seen lifting, especially me when I was younger, as like such a masculine thing to do, and you're obviously working with a lot of young girls that are lifting and they're finding it just something normal. Have you noticed any type of like culture shift with the girls you work with?
Actually, it was, that's kind of one of our favorite things to kind of talk about is that the young ladies, first of all, they kind of grab onto the lifting and they love it. And one of the things we've loved about it is that it changes their perception of themselves. It changes the perception of what they want out of the standard culture. So our young ladies are a little bit more muscular, but they can move more weight. They can do more pull-ups. They can do more, and they prize that over looking a certain way, which is just such a more healthy way of looking at it. They view themselves by what they can accomplish versus what somebody says they look like or what they see in the mirror. Secondly, I think it's really interesting. The young girls, like 11 to 13, 14, if we get them in that age group, they start to mature a little bit faster than the boys. So they're a couple years ahead of them. And what we see is that oftentimes there's a point where they're lifting more than the boys their same age. They're able to do more pull-ups than the boys their same. They're running faster than the boys their same age. And that does something when the society is telling them, look, you're not as strong as men. They're looking at it going like, well, no, I'm a lot stronger than the guys that I'm working at. And I think it does something to them and does something to the perception of themselves and something very healthy to the perception of themselves as they grow into young women. Some of our, one of our young ladies now is training to be on our staff. Sophie, she qualified for nationals, USAP nationals. She's competed. I think she came in 5th, valedictorian for high school, first year at MIT, and I would never say that the program accomplished that, but I would say that she thinks about herself differently than she might have if she hadn't been in this program. She always looks at things and goes, "Oh, well, I can do that. I can." You hear her talk, and she goes, "Oh, well, I can do that. I can do that. I can." Want to try that? Sure, I can do that. I think that's more important than how much they lift, but I think it's a offshoot or a byproduct of them being in the lifting program.
I think it's such a great thing that lifting teaches you. It's like, it just teaches you that you can do that, and it may just take some time. Mm-hmm. It might take a little bit more effort. It might take you having more discipline towards a bunch of other things in your life to be able to get to that goal. And you can kind of rationalize, okay, well, what fits into my lifestyle? Can I figure out a way to get more sleep to get to that next 400-pound deadlift? Can I figure out a way to have better nutrition? Can I figure out a way to maybe not go so heavy all the time, or think of some other things in your training? And usually the answer is yes. Sometimes there's not room. Sometimes it's like, to reach for stuff, sometimes you're overreaching, and that's where you can get injured, and that's where you can take a bunch of steps back. But for the most part, usually everyone can kind of agree, yeah, I could probably do that a little bit better. And yeah, I can probably get that eventually. Might take a little while, but I can get there.
And that's, then the coach can remove some of that from them as well. Because, it's our job to keep them safe. It's our job to keep them from getting injured. It's our job to keep them progressing forward. How do we do that? And then that's where individualization for knowing your kids starts to come into. And it's a different thing working with a 16-year-old boy than a 16-year-old girl. It just is. And you don't just go, well, I'm going to pile on the weight here and pile on the weight there. I'm going to understand what they need that day, apply it to them. And our program was very safe. I mean, I think we never had a real injury, pulled hamstring here or there, but weightlifting is extremely safe, and it's beneficial in almost all aspects of for kids, I think.
Yeah, I think all experts are actually pointing in that direction too. American Academy of Pediatrics actually, they released a statement 5 years ago now that said that weight training or resistance training for kids is not only safe, but it's beneficial in order to keep them safe through sport.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
It's huge, right? Like all of the experts are now showing like, hey, this is what you want to do. It's not just safe to do it, but it's actually what you want to do in order to keep your kids safe on the field, Right. So that's huge.
So you guys built up a brand, and I'm sure that's taken some time, taken some years, right? But from like a business perspective, you build up this system, and then you were able to help develop a system that was intertwined with CrossFit Kids. Is that correct? Do I have that wording of that right?
Yeah.
Right. And then you had many progressions. So, I mean, CrossFit's a huge company. So to be able to accomplish something like that is massive. And you guys have this gym, and you're working day and night, and you're kicking butt all day long, and you're working with a lot of people. You're impacting a lot of people's lives. But just like with everything else in life, everything has a progression. You know, you start in one spot and you build something up, and then you have to think about, you know, what's in the best interest of this company and of this brand. And so more recently, you guys have closed the gym, right?
Yep.
And now you guys are mainly working with coaches, and you mentioned the webinars and different things that you're doing, and seminars, and working with these kids as well, the heavier kids that were doing the powerlifting meet there. What has that been like? Because that's hard to do. You know, it's hard. It was probably hard to close the gym, right?
It's very hard.
I mean, in some ways, it's like, okay, good. I don't have to work 97 hours a week, but at the same time, that's a hard thing to put away.
There's that. But for me, you know, for the 40 years I worked in martial arts and had a gym, 20 years we had the gym, you know, I defined myself by that job. And I didn't really, you know, like I understood that I felt like what we were doing was important, and people needed to understand it. So I would go out and do the seminars. I never really liked standing in front of people and talking. I just don't. I liked working with the kids. I liked watching them progress. So shutting it down was a very emotional thing for me personally. I think it was the same for Mickey.
Probably like, where the hell do I go now? Like, what do I do with my time?
Right. Well, no, there's a lot of stuff to do. I think it was emotional on another level is our kids grew up there.
Yeah.
So like it was
like
just
moving out of a house.
Right.
Yeah.
And so shutting down the gym, like our youngest was still in college and in San Diego, and he's like, well, where am I going to go when I go to Ramona? What am I going to do? Well, you're going to go to Starbucks because like everybody else, so it was a difficult thing because, our family was intertwined with that.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a point where, it just, it breaks you. So the split we had and rebuilding the Brand X method, we had no money. We had to, we were getting contacted because we put good movement up on the internet on our Instagram. And it shocks me to this day that people would contact us and go like, well, we're looking at your Instagram and it's different than every other Instagram out there. Well, okay. And that's how we started to get people coming to us. And it was a lot of hours. And the idea of, how can we impact the most kids? What can we do that's best for kids? Well, that's always kind of been a driving force behind what we do. It certainly wasn't continue to work at the gym. It had to be, let's build something that that trainers and coaches can learn from.
How'd you come to that conclusion?
Well, it
was simple, right? Like it was. We can either continue working in this town with a population of 25,000, or we can.
It wasn't easy getting to your gym.
No, it's not, right?
I remember
like two roads into that town. That's it. Yeah.
I'm like, where the hell are we going?
Yeah.
The moon.
Yeah. No, it was kind of a simple decision to go, okay, we can keep helping kids here, and we can spend our time doing that, or we can take what we know and what we know to be right to thousands of coaches, hundreds of thousands of coaches, and have them impact people. And then your actual reach in doing what's best for kids grows exponentially, right? So that's where the shift was. And I think for me, like growing up, like they said, I was inside of I grew up inside of that gym. And then I had the shift and the ability to kind of change gears from an athlete there to a coach there, to also helping coaches outside. It's kind of been, it's been an emotional thing for me too, because I went from being inside of the class and knowing what it did for me, knowing what it gave me, and being able to actually give that to other kids too, So that was kind of tough, closing it down.
And then there's a shift from, do we schedule seminars, or do we do something online that's standardized? And every time you do a seminar, you go, well, that was a great seminar, but I forgot to do this, or I forgot to do that, and I forgot to tell them this. So then it was, okay, well, now we need to standardize what we're teaching, make sure that it's all out there. So we have this PYCC, where we're standardized the principles about what we're doing. And then when we're done with that, they launch into the PYCC Pro, which is an online thing that's only open to people who've been through the PYCC, but it's all about implementation, hundreds of videos on how to get kids to move well and things like that. Now we can start talking about online or live seminars. So we have the Art of Growing Up Strong, where our first offering.
Before you move on to that, did this by getting rid of the gym, does it cut down on a lot of overhead, or did you just incur more overhead because now you got to do these videos and stuff? Or they're just similar.
It just cut down on over. They're two separate things.
Right.
Well, they weren't the same. They weren't under the same umbrella. So we had Brand X, the gym, and we had Brand X, the
global company.
And I'm not the money guy. Do we have enough money to eat this week? Sure, good. I'm good. That's about it. The overhead wasn't a consideration on my part. The time was, and then there was the emotional drain of, you're building this global thing and it's going along really well, and then you walking in, trying to put your 30 hours into the gym as well.
I see. You don't have the time to work outside the gym when you had the gym,
and it's also
to build what you want.
It's also draining. Like how much time you talk about working with a client, then you've got 30 teenagers. For me, it was 30 teenagers, and you're investing yourself in these clients. It's very difficult. It was really emotionally hard too. I mean, I'm just tired at the end of the week, but there was no end of the week because we had to work Saturday and Sunday because we were doing the gym. So really it was more a time investment thing.
No days off.
There was no days off.
And then what's the progression now? I cut you off there a little bit. You moved into coaching coaches and more of this.
So we have the online, but then I'll let you talk about the Art of Growing Up Strong.
Yeah, the Art of Growing Up Strong, really the idea behind that is, so PYCC gives the principles of the Brand X method. The Art of Growing Up Strong live seminars are going to give coaches the autonomy to choose what they want to be experts in terms of kids fitness. So right now we've got Youth Barbell. We're building a Explore Art of Growing Up Strong, which would be 3 to 8 year olds. So if coaches want to work specifically with 3 to 8 year olds, here you go. 8 to 12 would be next. So Express, Art of Growing Up Strong, Excel, 12 to 18. So you've got all of these different age groups, or different areas of fitness. Let's say gymnastics, for example, which we're working on. Art of Growing Up Strong, mental health, which we're working on. All of these areas and aspects of fitness would give the coach kind of the ability to choose, hey, I want to be an expert specifically with working with 3 to 8 year olds, and I want to learn about how to make them mentally strong as well. So I'm going to attend the Art of Growing Up Strong Explore and the Art of Growing Up Strong mental health. Just giving them the opportunity and the options to choose expertise in their field now, beyond the general education that you find in the PYCC.
Cool. What are some other goals you guys have now? You got anything in particular coming up? Any seminars or traveling anywhere or anything like that?
Yeah, we got seminars all over, man. We got actually going to Australia for like 3 weeks in August.
You still do physical seminars?
Yeah, the live seminars. That's what the Art of Growing Up Strong is.
Got it.
So we're going to Argentina for a couple days in April. We'll be in Ireland that same weekend, so we'll have 2 groups kind of coaching those. We've got one coming up inside of in Houston. We've got one coming up in Miami. We've got one coming up actually 3 weeks. We're going to Australia later this year in August. So those are popping up, and all of those can be found on the brandxmethod.com. So if coaches are looking to either learn a little bit more in a certain area, they can find those, and that might lead into interest inside of the PYCC too.
We're working with the International Functional Fitness Federation to help their coaches know how to train kids, to help them define what kids' fitness competition should look like. Shouldn't look like an adult competition. We shouldn't have 3-day beatdowns, 8-year-olds doing Murph. That's not appropriate. But we can have fun, competitions where kids get, markers on where they are and where they can move to and things like that. And so we're working with them to expand that. We're working with Carrie Walsh on her P1440 project. That's been really rewarding as well. That's kind of where the company is heading.
You're still keeping all the good stuff for the kids in the U.S. though, right? Like the secrets.
Yeah, all of it.
We need some golds.
All of it. All of that. Only for here.
Okay.
Any other
Specifically.
questions?
I think we touched on it a little bit, but I'm curious, because certain coaches are super analytical, right? They look at studies, and when you have to work with somebody, especially a kid, I know you said you have like different leadership portions of the program, but is that stuff, do you feel that you can really teach individuals how to do that? Because I know certain people who it would be extremely difficult to teach them how to motivate an individual, especially a kid. How do you really get into the weeds with that?
Do you want to handle that or me?
Go ahead and start.
Okay, go ahead and start. I'll clean it up, Dad. Being analytical, the science informs what we do.
Yeah.
And then we prove the science. But the thing is a coach is a coach. And I think there's a couple pieces there. I don't think that you can, I promise I'll circle back to what you're talking about. But I don't think that a course can teach you to be a good coach, like teach the principles of being a good coach. And then you have to go apply it. And that's what part of the mentorship process with the Brand Express, the training centers is about, is getting in the weeds and telling somebody what I see, because I've been doing it for 20 years, and trying to elevate their eye, and then also trying to talk to them about how we would transmit this. Some people aren't cut out to be coaches. Some people aren't cut out to program. Some, you can't fix that. But for most people, you can talk to them about, having, where do you start? Well, we start with empathy for the kid. I have an individual child standing here in front of me. I want to do what's best for that particular child. We start with that. Well, if I have a analytical coach standing in front of me, I can say to him, you're working with a 6-year-old. Talking to him about bone density and jumping mechanics is probably not what you want to do, right? Let's just talk to him about jumping and how much fun it is to jump up and down on this thing. That may seem like very easy, but it's really what you're doing is taking somebody, and you as the head coach, taking another coach under your wing and providing him what you see in your eye, from your eyes and from your point of view, and then allowing him to go out and implement that. And I think that it really starts I don't think you can be a good coach unless you've worked with good coaches. I used to follow people around in my old life, and I would just I can remember the coaches going why are you standing next to me? Well, because I just want to hear how you're doing this. And I think that that's what we're trying to provide for the coaches in the mentoring process within our training centers, is give you the eye I have now from doing this, give you the perspective I have, and then I'll give you how I would deal with this, but I want you then to go out and try to implement it on your own. But as long as you have, I think if we start with the idea of empathy for the child, empathy for that 6-year-old that you're working with, that starts to break down that, if you're talking about an analytical coach, starts to break that down. Like you realize you're standing here talking to a 7-year-old.
Yeah, just kind of bringing it back to what you said right out of the gate, right? Like science informs practice, but practice validates science. And I think it goes both ways, especially in this industry. Like you can have all the fancy pieces of paper that say your name on them, but unless you've actually, been in the trenches and done the coaching, it doesn't really mean anything, right?
Yeah.
And so what we're saying is like, hey, we've got all of the experience here, and we're showing people how to do it. It's all there, but until you actually go and put it into play, it's all of your fancy pieces of paper are null. So it's kind of, it goes both ways.
How many guys have you've trained that's like they can't stick with a program?
Oh yeah, we see it all the time.
So it's a programming ADD, right?
Yeah.
Like I tried this and it didn't work. Well, how long were you on it? I was 3 weeks. Well, it doesn't work, and I feel like oftentimes, especially with people coming into like coaching with kids, that they kind of get like that. Like they don't understand that if you have a 5-year-old, you have got, probably 6 to 7 years before that kid starts to get loaded. You've got a long time to get that kid to move well, to enjoy moving, to think of moving as as breakfast. And I got to get to the gym. I got to come in and do the gym. And if you take that view, it's not really critical today that I've got your knee in the right place. What's critical is I've told you about it and you're jumping and having a good time. And then tomorrow I'm going to tell you about it again, and we're going to keep going for another 5 years. And then suddenly I'm going to put you under a bar and you're going to be a monster. And I think if you have that perspective and you start to give people that perspective, they have a very different understanding of how to coach. When you're dealing with an adult, they want to be under the bar and lifting heavy tomorrow.
Yeah.
6-year-old doesn't. They want to have fun with their friends.
Yeah, just the fact they get conscious of it at a young age and they start thinking about it, and then it'll be just ingrained in them forever.
Right.
Where can people find you guys? What's the Instagram handles and websites and all that good stuff?
We're thebrandxmethod.com and at thebrandxmethod on Instagram.
Sounds super complicated. Thank you guys so much. It's been a lot of fun having you on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Strength is never weakness. Weakness is never strength. Catch you guys later.